The wind rolled off the frost-mantled ridges of the northern hills in low, mournful waves, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant wood smoke to Winterfell's godswood. Dawn crept, pallid and reluctant, across the gray horizon, spilling over the turrets and ramparts, touching sword-scored stone with weak shafts of gold. Beneath the ancient boughs of the heart tree, the faces on its pale bark wept red sap, as though they mourned the quiet transformation that was already set in motion, one that neither humble crofter nor a proud high lord could yet fathom. Jon Snow stood alone before the weirwood, breathing deeply of the cold air, wool-clad shoulders rising and falling with calm deliberation. The biting chill had ceased to trouble him since the first time he'd clutched a practice sword too large for his boyish grip. By now it felt like a familiar companion. He sank to one knee in the hoarfrost-dusted earth, placing a gloved hand against the rough, bleeding trunk. He did not pray in practiced words. His thoughts flowed wordless, an instinctive communion. Somewhere beneath the stillness coursed a sense of decision, as if the old gods whispered that a diverging path lay before him. His chest tightened with the knowledge that he was poised at the brink of a future none had dared imagine. Footfalls sounded behind him, crunching over crisp leaves. He did not turn until the rustle of skirts and the soft exhale of breath announced that Sansa had arrived. She halted a respectful pace back, auburn hair bound in a maiden's knot, fox fur mantle pulled snug about her throat. "You rise early even when no one bids it," she said, voice subdued, a thread of amusement woven through. "Today of all days you might allow yourself a slower morning." Jon rose, brushing frost from his knee. "Sleep comes ill when half the realm arrives on our doorstep." He tried for levity, but the weight of what loomed ahead pressed on his tone. Sansa's winter-blue gaze softened. "We are Starks," she replied. "We meet threats or blessings the same way, head on." Jon huffed a nod. Threats or blessings. What House Tyrell proposed, what she had proposed in her deliberate Lady of Winterfell cadence, was something that could be either. A union of the North and the Reach, underpinned by Tyrell gold and blossoming roses, sealed in vows spoken before gods both old and new. And the bride in question, Margaery Tyrell, had the charm to warm halls from White Harbor to the Arbor, they said. Yet Jon had not met her. He could only trust the tidings Lord Davos brought from the south and the firmness in Sansa's counsel. They walked from the godswood in silence, boots echoing soft thuds against flagstone. The castle stirred awake. Smiths stoking forges, stable hands leading shaggy ponies out for water, bakers kneading dough until their knuckles whitened. Smoke curled from chimneys, tearing into the pale sky like banners of resolve. Jon greeted each face with a nod that felt weighted by expectation. To them, he was king in the north, the one they rallied behind on an icy night when bolts of lightning forked across the sky and banners bearing the direwolf unfurled anew. But kingship sat uneasily on him, more mantle than crown, stitched from loyalty and love rather than ambition. And now, a new cloak might be laid atop it. Green, embroidered with golden roses. Deep in the tower chambers, they'd set aside for guests of honor. Lady Olenna sat by the hearth in a chair cushioned with patterned silks, her sharp eyes reflecting the flames as though she might divine their meaning. Across from her, Margaery knelt, amid a scattered garden of gowns offered by seamstresses desperate to impress. One gown of deep hunter green shimmered with silver thread. Another of Tyrell rose pink caught the ruddy glow of the fire. "Take care to choose wisely, girl," Olenna muttered, though her tone lacked true worry. "The North will forgive much, but not gluttonous pageantry while its bellies growl." Margaery smoothed the sleeve of the green, head canted. "And yet, they do love a bit of color to relieve the white." Her smile curved. "Rye. I would rather not startle them into thinking a Reach lady is no more than a bright parakeet." Olenna peered over her spectacles. A woman who knows restraint while still turning heads. How rare. "Still, you will do what's necessary." She punctured the moment with a decisive rap of her cane on the oak plank floor. "Remember what you represent. You are not merely a flower to be admired. You are the consummation of a bargain more potent than steel." Margaery set the gown aside and lifted her chin. I know, grandmother. This union may keep grain flowing to Winterfell when the snows deepen. And Tyrell coffers will have northern shields should Ironborn raid or Lannister lions creep north again. She rose with the grace of practiced court dance, yet her voice dipped quieter. But I also hope Jon Snow is more than numbers on a marriage contract. Olenna's lips twitched. I dare say he is. A bastard turned king. Closer to legend than man. Those of us who live long enough learn that legend can be dangerous. But you were always fond of handsome danger. Margaery allowed a breathy laugh. And you, grandmother, were fond of seeing my ambitions realized. Ambition, Olenna corrected, is the difference between the spider and the fly. She gave a brisk nod toward the gowns. Pick the green. They say Starks hold sacred their pine forests. Let them see you as evergreen, unfading even in the cold. The decision made, Margaery dismissed the attendants with a flick of her hand. When the door closed, she let her composure slip a fraction. Enough for the doubt to creep in. She had worn crowns and widow's veils, had tasted the sweetness of influence and the bitterness of court suspicion. Yet the North, with its austere gods and harsher tales, was a realm she had only studied from afar. Stoic nobles, grim humor, wolves that could swallow a man whole. She touched the silver direwolf brooch Olenna, pressed into her palm at dawn's first light, feeling its sharp edges nip at her skin. Could she thrive here, far from sunlit vineyards and the sound of lutes? Fire popped. Olenna rose, leaning heavy on her cane, and approached. She rested an aged, veined hand on Margaery's cheek. Fear not, child. Roses root even through stone if given time. Word of the approaching wedding spread beyond castle walls, carried by ravens and the loose tongues of travelers. In White Harbor, Lord Wyman manderly weighed the news as he sampled a dish of fried cod tongues. A Tyrell queen for the north, he mused aloud to his son Wylis, thick fingers tapping on the oaken table. There are worse matches. The Reach feeds half the realm. Jon Snow may yet prove cannier than his father. At the wall, the few remaining Black brothers likewise exchanged murmurs. Samwell Tarly, quill poised over parchment, imagined the ripple of alliances. The North no longer isolated but linked to fertile fields far south. Somewhere in Old Town. High in the high tower, Archmaester Abrose tucked away a scroll, pondering how Dragonfire might once again flicker across Westeros if rumors of Jon's true blood proved more than Bard's fancy. South still, in the gilded corridors of Casterly Rock, Sir Jaime Lannister paced before a narrow balcony as his sister queen idled in a golden seat. Cersei's mouth curved in a scornful line. A bastard wed to a scheming rose, she said. Let them plant themselves in frost. The North is wolves. The Reach is rabbits. See how they fare when winter devours them both. Now, Jaime's gaze drifted eastward. Rabbits breed, wolves must hunt, and Gold Sister buys many snares. Cersei scoffed, but said nothing more, fingers drumming a restless tattoo against her armrest. Preparations consumed Winterfell. Great hearths roared day and night, roasting boars, curing fish, baking loaves until the air smelled of yeast and hot lard. Looms clacked in near-constant rhythm, weaving hangings of wool dyed in greens and whites. The courtyard rang with sparring steel as visiting men-at-arms measured northern strength. Amid that bustle, Jon found himself adrift in formalities, reviewing wine shipments from the arbor, approving seatings for the feast, enduring Maester Wolkin's recitation of marriage, rites from both faith of the Seven and the old gods to ensure not a single guest could find insult. He accepted it all with silent stoicism, though nights found him restless, wandering parapets in moon-washed solitude. It was on one such night 3 days before the vows that he first glimpsed Margaery Tyrell. She walked along the east gallery overlooking the godswood, a cloak of moss-green velvet about her shoulders, lantern lit by a single golden flame. Jon had emerged from a side stair, intent on quiet, but halted as she paused before the frost-rimmed window. Snow dusted her dark curls, glimmering like scattered diamonds. For a heartbeat he considered turning back, but courtesy asserted itself. Lady Margaery. Her head turned. The lantern's glow illuminated high cheekbones and eyes of warm hazel. She offered a curtsy that seemed artless despite its perfection. Your Grace. Or do you still prefer John beyond the hall? Then, he inclined his head. Titles serve their purpose, but names feel truer. He stepped closer, boots muffled on rush-strewn stone. You find the castle comfortable? Comfortable, yes. She looked beyond the window to where pale starlight traced the heart tree's bloody tears. And formidable. Her breath clouded the glass. In the Reach, winter is a quaint rumor. Here, it is an emperor. I confess I admire the North for living beneath such a ruler and refusing to bow. John followed her gaze. We bow to no tyrant, but we heed the season. Like wolves heed their stomachs. Then I won. She smiled at that. And yet you invite Reach flowers to dwell among the frost. Some would call that brave. Others, foolish. Perhaps both. John folded arms against his chest. But even wolves seek warmth. The silence that followed was not awkward. Rather, it bristled with the electricity of first judgment. Margaery studied him, the solemn dark eyes, the scar still faint on his cheek, the posture of a man forged in battle rather than born to a throne. I am glad to finally meet you, she said. Letters fail to capture the living heartbeat of a place. Or a king. Then Shan. He nodded. I suppose I am poor with letters. A hint of self-deprecation. Better with blades. Then we balance each other, she offered lightly. Word and sword, rose and wolf. John nearly smiled. Rose and wolf. He glanced at her lantern. Should I escort you to the guest wing? These corridors twist. I would not have you lost before dawn. Thank you. She stepped to his side, and together they moved down the candlelit passage. Her perfume, faint rosewater mingled with pine from the cloaks, lingered in the cool air. Conversation meandered from the taste of Wintertown's cider to the manner in which white ravens announce the changing of seasons. John found her curious rather than vain, quick with laughter yet tempered by observations that revealed a mind sharpened on politics. By the time they reached her chamber door, the castle torches guttered low. If the North feels formidable, John said, no, you need not face it alone. Margaery's gaze softened. Thank you, Jon Snow. She touched his forearm, a fleeting warmth through wool. Good night. Good night, my lady. He retreated, pulse steady yet markedly aware of her presence lingering like breath on a mirror. He wondered whether the gods approved of matches that blended ice and blossom. Snow fell the night before the wedding, curtain-soft flakes drifting through still air. High in the battlements, John stood with Sir Davos Seaworth, both men clad in furs. She seems well matched to you, Davos remarked, watching the silent dance of snow. Clever and kind, and unafraid to speak truth. John huffed a breath. Do I deserve that? His words wisped white. Deserving or not, you are king. The Onion Knight stroked his beard. The realm survives on alliances. Same as ships rely on sails. Without them, we drift. John glanced sideways. Is that Stannis's wisdom? Some of it. Some my own. Davos fixed him with earnest gray eyes. A good marriage is more than coin and banners. She will share burdens you cannot name, shield you in ways swords cannot. John turned back to the knight, remembering Margaery's hand on his arm. I hope I can shield her in return. Davos clasped Jon's shoulder. Do that, and you'll be a better king than most. The dawn of the wedding broke crisp and bright, sunlight igniting icicles until they glittered like shards of sky. Bells chimed across the courtyard. A procession wound from the great hall, lords and ladies armored in furs juxtaposed with Tyrell silks. Floral garlands of pale winter roses, grown in heated glasshouses, and rushed north at ruinous expense, lined the aisles, their perfume mixing with pine pitch and smoking torches. John waited beneath the ancient weirwood's reaching limbs, cloak of direwolf gray trimmed in white hair. The old gods bore witness with bleeding eyes, and beyond them, the new gods watched through the seven-pointed crystal septa, erected for the occasion. Maester Walken stood ready. scroll in hand. As trumpets sounded, Margaery emerged from the castle gate, arm linked with Sir Loras. Her gown of hunter green shimmered along embroidered silver branches. At her waist, a belt of tiny golden roses circled like sunlight. Snowflakes settled in her hair, melting to diamonds. A hush fell upon the assembly. Each step she took seemed to weave southern elegance into northern soil. When she reached Jon, their gazes locked. An alliance sealed not in ink, but in mutual recognition. Together they knelt at the tree's roots, where red sap seeped like slow tears. Maester Walken proclaimed words for the seven. Jon's voice joined hers in vows to father, mother, warrior, maiden, smith, crone, and stranger. Then, as tradition of the North demanded, they laid hands upon the heart tree's trunk. Jon spoke. "Before the old gods I pledge my life and love." Margaery echoed, palm pressing the bark where his hand rested. The weirwood accepted their promise in silence older than empires. A roar rose about them. Cheers, the clash of shields, Tyrell trumpets swirling with stark horns. Snow flurried in sudden gust, swirling around bride and groom like a mantle of white fire. Jon leaned to her ear. "Are you cold?" "Not at all," she whispered, lips curving. "The north is warmer than I feared." He smiled. Small, genuine, and led her through the arch of raised swords. Feasting would last deep into the night. Casks of gold arbor wine were opened alongside barrels of dark northern ale. Minstrels from the Reach partnered with Wintertown fiddlers, their melodies twisting bright summer with haunting snow. But long before the hall filled with laughter, thick as steam above meat pies, the newly wedded pair withdrew to walk the outer walls. Below, torchlight bathed the courtyards in glowing pools. Beyond, the dark forest loomed, stark against the star-littered sky. Margaery paused at a crenellation, her cloak fluttering. "I could forget the wider realm exists," she murmured. "It always exists," Jon replied, stepping to her side. "Even when we wish otherwise." She turned to him fully. "Then we must guide it wisely. Together." Jon traced a line on the stone parapet. "Together," he echoed. "But know this path will not be without peril. Peril is a companion I know. Kings and queens fall oft as leaves." She laid a gloved hand atop his. "Let us plant roots deeper than fear." A silence hung, rich, as though the very air recognized the forging of steel within them. Jon gazed at her, remembering ghost stories told of northern winters, tales where beauty led men to folly. Yet in her eyes he saw not temptation but partnership. Cunning tempered by empathy, ambition balanced by grace. He spoke softly. "There is something I must confess." Margaery's brow arched. "Your face grows grave. What secret weighs so?" He exhaled plume of fog. "I am more than a northern bastard crowned by acclamation." He paused. The wind sighed. "My blood carries the dragon's fire. I am—" She raised a hand in gentle interruption. "Targaryen." A measured breath. "Rumors reach even the Reach, and if they are more than rumor, they are truth." He waited for recoil, but she merely searched his features. "Dragonfire married to Tyrell Gold." She mused. "A union twice forged. You do not fear that?" "Fear? No." Her smile returned, faint but earnest. "I fear starvation and plague. The fires of dragons I will greet, if they serve the realm." Jon felt tension ebb from his spine. "Then we stand stronger." "Stronger," she agreed. "But we must tread with care. The Iron Throne still casts a long shadow. Cersei will not abide threats. Now, we will not seek war," Jon said, "but we will not shrink from it." His hand closed over hers. "Will you stand beside me if winter grows darker?" "I will stand," she pledged, "and bloom even in snow." Their first night as husband and wife, they spent in a chamber above the hot springs, steam curling at the chiseled rafters. Mulled wine warmed their lips. Conversation warmed their guarded hearts. Jon spoke of Ghost and the Wall, of vows sworn to brothers now lost. of scars left by betrayal and redemption. Margaery recounted masking sorrow behind smiles when widowed thrice by political storms, of gardens tended to soothe restless minds, of how she learned to read truth behind lies during long stays at court. Later, when candles guttered and sheets tangled, they discovered the unspoken language of trust, tentative but undeniable. Outside, snow hammered the windows, driven by sudden squalls. Yet inside the stone walls, a new alliance took root. In days that followed, Winterfell brimmed with ephemeral peace. Margaery walked the castle with infectious warmth, praising cooks for their stews, admiring embroidered wolf banners as though they were priceless tapestries. She ventured into Wintertown, distributing barley cakes to children who stared wide-eyed at the southern lady wearing a cloak of green leaves. Sansa watched, smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, seeing how hearts thawed around the newcomer. Jon convened his council, Lyanna Mormont fierce despite boots scarcely reaching floor, Lord Glover and Lord Serwyn debating supply lines, Lionel Corbray visiting from the Vale to observe northern readiness. At the high table, Margaery listened, offering questions about harvest yields and suggesting incentivizing White Harbor merchants with Reach spices to diversify trade. Some scoffed at first, until Lord Serwyn computed the coin such trade could bring. Oleander and Wolfbane Davos quipped under his breath. But peace is rarely more than the calm breath before the hawk stoops. Word came by Raven. An iron-born longship sighted off the stony shore, raiding goat herders. Another Raven from Hornwood reported sellswards wearing a crimson lion sigil, harassing small folk near the neck. Jon scowled at the implications. Cersei probing northern resilience, testing the wolf's new alliances. He ordered patrols doubled, sent Glover's men to reinforce the neck, and at Margaery's urging, dispatched swift riders to Old Town with letters requesting that the Tyrell fleet move to shield the western coast. Though House Tyrell's martial reputation paled beside its wealth, its ships were sturdy, and its captains eager for proving. In the rookery, Jon sealed each scroll with wax stamped half direwolf, half rose, an emblem freshly carved. He felt the weight of it, a symbol heavy as iron. Meanwhile, far to the east across the narrow sea, a young queen with silver hair watched searching eyes of dragons and considered rumors of a northern king bound in both ice and fire. But that is a tale for another night, and the winds had yet to carry her answer to Westeros. When spring's first thaw kissed the fields, Jon and Margaery rode from Winterfell to visit small steads and holdfasts. They traveled with modest retinue, Davos, Brienne of Tarth acting as Sansa's sworn shield on loan, and a half-dozen guards. At each village, they listened to grievances. A collapsed grain silo, disputes over field boundaries, wolves preying on sheep. Margaery dispensed herbal sachets to mothers. Jon promised timber and masons to rebuild. They dined on turnip soup and venison haunch, sleeping in drafty halls where snow still seeped under lintels. One night, beneath a tar-black sky littered with stars, their campfire crackled. Davos spoke of storms that ruin crops. Brienne recounted an oath to protect the innocent. Margaery hummed a Reach lullaby. Jon found himself smiling more than he had in years. Yet in quiet moments he sensed another presence, half seen. Dreams of dragons circling frozen lakes, of a wall of black ice cracking beneath scorching flame. In those dreams, Margaery stood beside him, her cloak a banner snapping in hot winds. Back at Winterfell, a raven from Old Town arrived bearing grim tidings. Lord Paxter Redwine's fleet, sailing north under Tyrell banners, intercepted by Euron Greyjoy's silence and scattered. Only a handful of ships limped into deepwood mud, masts shattered. Anger simmered in Jon's gut. Euron's aggression signaled more than opportunistic raiding. It was a message. He called banners with measured urgency. "I will not allow Ironborn to bleed our people," he told the hall, voice carrying like thunder. Lords answered. Mormont, Serwyn, Hornwood, Tallheart, all swore to muster. Yet war could not be waged on water by North alone. Margaery stepped forward before the gathered host. "My lords," she said, tone like velvet concealing steel, "the Reach will not sit idle. Though our ships were assailed, Tyrell coffers remain brimming. I propose we hire the Red Manti mercenary fleet out of Lys. 1,000 sails for 1,000 dragons of gold. Murmurs rippled. Some balked at enlisting sell sails. Jon met Davos' eye. The smuggler frowned but grudgingly nodded. Better sell sails than no sails. Draw coin from Highgarden. Jon commanded. Let it be known the North repays its debts in coin and loyalty. More than coin, Margaery added, turning to him. When the seas are free, we must send grain to the isles struck by famine. Show them the wolf and Rose are not mere conquerors. She lowered her voice. Win hearts as well as battles. Jon's admiration stirred anew. Agreed. As moons turned and the Red Manti unfurled striped sails toward Westeros, Winterfell became a forge where strategy, diplomacy, and quiet affection melded. In the great library, Jon read histories of Aegon's conquest beside Margaery as she drafted charitable decrees. Ghost lounged at their feet, guardian of peace. Sansa noted the changed atmosphere. Even stoic northern lords softened under Margaery's deft compliments. But not all warmed. Lady Lyanna Mormont remained wary. Nationalist pride prickled by southern influence. She confronted Jon in the council room. We bent knee to a Stark, she said. Chin high. Will we now answer to a Tyrell as well? Jon met her bold gaze. You answer to your king? My queen aids me. Together, we defend the North. He clasped her small shoulder. Your counsel remains dear to me, Lyanna. The girl's frown eased by a hair's breadth. Then let us hope the rose bears thorns enough to pierce iron. Messages traveled south. In Highgarden's jasmine-scented courtyards, Olenna Tyrell received reports of her granddaughter charming wolves. She smiled a thin smile. Let the realm see what bloom grows when watered by northern snow. In King's Landing, ravens whispered of Stark Tyrell alliances to Qyburn's network of little birds. Cersei shattered a wine goblet against the Iron Throne's foot. I will not share this continent with wolves and weeds, she hissed. Plans unfurled. Coins to buy blades and bravos. Letters to uncertain riverlords. She would topple the budding union before it rooted deep. On a brisk morning, Jon trained in the yard, sparring with Brienne under the watchful eye of men-at-arms. Margaery emerged, laughter igniting as Jon stumbled on frost. She approached, offering water. Brienne excused herself with a bow. Jon leaned on a training sword. You find amusement in my missteps. I find comfort in knowing even kings lose footing. She extended the cup. He drank, breath fogging. Perhaps you should try. He offered the wooden sword. Brows arched. She accepted. The yard hushed as Queen faced King. She swung, awkward but bold. Jon parried lightly, guiding her arms. Soon laughter filled the cold air, each light strike echoing promise. Watching, Sansa felt a pang of happiness rare since childhood. That night, candlelight glimmered on parchment as Jon and Margaery traced lines on a map. Plans to rebuild ports at the stony shore, to station watchtowers along Cape Kraken. She demonstrated how Tyrell accountants could funnel coin toward timber and hemp, while northern stonemasons offered labor. The map became less a static relic than a living blueprint. See here. She pointed. If we extend harbor walls, we can shelter twice the longships. Jon nodded. And if the wall remains manned by a token garrison, we could relocate craftsmen to new villages south of the Gift. Settlers will need seed grain. Highgarden can supply. A pause as they acknowledged the synergy born of vows spoken in frost. She sighed contentedly. I did not expect to find such purpose so far from home. He set Quill aside. Home is where we choose to build. Their eyes locked. In that moment the room felt smaller, warmed not by hearth but mutual conviction. Spring storms battered the coast when news arrived. The Red Manti engaged Euron's fleet near the Lonely Light, burning 3 ironborn longships, forcing the Silence to flee. The north erupted in triumphant cheers. Yet victory cost 50 Lyseni lives and 2 Tyrell captains taken prisoner. War, even distant, exacted a price. Jon penned a letter to the captives' families, promising restitution. Margaery added personal notes, citing bravery and acknowledging grief. When Raven swept south bearing those letters, a small but significant trust blossomed between Rose and Wolf. On Midsummer's Eve, Winterfell hosted a tourney, the first in northern memory, to celebrate harvest seedlings sprouting. Jon hesitated, fearing extravagance, but Margaery insisted brief revelry bolstered morale. Jousting lists thrust lances into targets of straw. Axe throwers competed before crowds. Children chased painted wooden wolves. Margaery crowned the victor, a burly blacksmith's apprentice, with a wreath of juniper and white rose. His grin lit the dusk. That night, fireworks soared, rare southern marvels brought north, flecks of emerald and crimson bursting above towers. Jon watched, arms around Margaery. "You bring color to our skies." "No," she murmured, resting her head against his chest. "I merely reveal hues that were always there." But beyond the glow of fireworks, darker fires sparked. In Casterly Rock, Cersei struck bargain with the Golden Company. 10,000 sellswords and war elephants, promising gold, plucked from Lannister mines. Euron, nursing pride, offered fleets. And lurking in shadows of distant Essos, a young queen's dragons beat wings anxious for wind currents that would carry them west. One crisp dawn, as ravens cried, Jon and Margaery walked the battlements. Ghost trotted ahead, snow crusting his ivory fur. "Do you believe peace will hold?" she asked. "I believe we must act as though it will," he replied, voice low. "And be ready when it doesn't." She took his gloved hand. "Then we will face storms side by side." He drew her closer, breath warming her brow. Together, Rose and Wolf. Below, Winterfell stirred. Smiths striking anvils, maids drawing well water, children laughing amid the snowmelt. Life, ephemeral yet enduring, thrived. And above it, in the morning light, banners of direwolf grey crossed with golden rose fluttered in unison, proclaiming to realm and gods alike that a new season, neither holy winter nor summer, had come to Westeros. Ravens traced restless paths across the pale vault of sky, black specks wheeling against clouds heavy with midsummer rain. Their distant cries drifted over Winterfell's ramparts, weaving between banners that snapped in a brisk wind. Direwolf grey crossed by the golden rose of Highgarden. Courtyards echoed with hammer blows and laughter. Crisp morning light glinted on damp stone, lending the ancient keep a rare, almost festive brightness. Yet beneath the gentle tumult of daily life beat a tension as steady and unseen as a forge bellows. Jon Snow woke before dawn, spurred by the half-remembered scent of ash and salt, on a wind that had no business reaching this far inland. Dreams of cold seas and charred sails vanished when his eyes opened, yet the unease lingered, a warning gnawing beneath his sternum. He rose without disturbing Margaery, who slept curled beneath furs, a copper curl fallen over one cheek. The soft rise and fall of her breath soothed him, anchoring him to the present. Still, something in the air urged him to move. He donned a simple gray tunic and stepped into the corridor where a lone torch guttered, shedding orange glow on bare stone. Ghost waited, amber eyes gleaming, a silent sentinel at the threshold. Together, they descended into the quiet of pre-dawn Winterfell, past guards nodding sleepy greetings and kitchen boys stoking fires for the morning's bread. Outside, the courtyard smelled of wet earth and forge coal. Jon tested the air. No scent of smoke, no hint of brine, only the echo of his dream remained. At the practice yard he found Sir Brienne already at her forms, sword flashing silver in torchlight. She saluted without pausing, sweat beading on her brow. Jon watched for a moment, noting the precision of each cut, then moved to a rack and lifted a wooden blade. They sparred wordlessly, feet scuffing damp soil, strikes clapping in rhythmic bursts that startled crows from the battlements. Brienne pressed him hard, Twice she knocked his guard wide. The third time he slipped aside and tapped her pauldron. Sweat cooled on his skin as dawn flushed the sky pink. When they finally lowered swords, Brienne sheathed her steel and wiped her brow. "You drifted," she observed. "Your mind was elsewhere." "I slept poorly," Jon admitted. "Dreamt of ships on fire. I cannot shake it." Brienne's gaze sharpened. "Premonition? Or nonsense?" He set the practiced sword back. "But I have learned not to ignore the improbable." Brienne offered a nod. "I'll speak with Sir Jory and double the watch on the walls tonight." Jon clasped her forearm in gratitude. She departed toward the armory, cloak snapping behind her. Ghost padded to Jon's side and nuzzled his hand. Jon stroked the direwolf's thick fur, gaze roaming the awakening keep. If peril hung beyond the horizon, he would meet it prepared. Margaery stirred to find sunlight streaming through mullioned windows, gilding the chamber's stone walls. The fragrance of lavender water drifted from the wash basin. She rose, slipped into a velvet robe, and padded barefoot to the balcony. Below, the godswood rustled, a sea of green, flecked by dew. The heart tree's white branches reached heavenward, framed by mists clinging to the moat. She breathed deeply, pine, cold water, freshly baked oatcakes from the distant kitchens. Memories of her first days here flickered. The odd stares of Wintertown's children, the wary nod from Lady Lyanna Mormont, Jon's solemn promise beneath snowflakes. She traced the smooth rail with gentle fingers. This place, harsh and noble, had begun to feel like more than a duty. It felt like possibility. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Sansa entered, chilled cheeks flushed from the corridor. "Forgive the hour," she said. "I hope to catch you before the council meets." "Come in," Margaery replied, drawing her robe tighter. "Sit by the fire. Your hands are freezing." Sansa accepted the offered seat near the hearth. "A merchant arrived from White Harbor at dawn," she began. "He claims Riverland roads swarm with Lannister levies in sellsword colors. Lord Manderly sent word. The lion stirs." Margaery folded her robe sleeves. "If Cersei means to strike, she will choose many daggers rather than one sword." She poured Sansa mulled cider from a silver pitcher. "How does the North respond?" "The lords grow restless." Sansa accepted the cup, steam wreathing her face. "Some urge Jon to strike preemptively. Others fear thinning our forces while Euron prowls the coast." Margaery sipped her own cider, savoring the cinnamon bite. "Divide and exhaust. The oldest tactic. We must counter by binding." She rose and crossed to a map pinned on the wall, each holdfast marked with wolf sigils or Tyrell roses. "If we reinforce the crossing at the Twins, Frey sympathizers will hesitate. And we should send envoys south, extend olive branches to the Blackwoods and Tully remnants. Old grievances weaken in the face of common threat." Sansa's gaze remained on the flames. "Jon's council accepts your guidance, yet some lords question a southern queen steering northern matters." "They do," Margaery agreed. "Which is why my voice must be yours. Let us craft proposals jointly. If they come from Lady of Winterfell, skepticism lessens." Sansa studied her, then smiled faintly. "We are stronger together." Margaery reached to squeeze her hand. "Always." Footsteps in the corridor announced another visitor. Davos knocked, then poked his head through. "Begging your pardons, my ladies. The king calls council in the solar." "We're on our way," Margaery replied. She dressed swiftly in evergreen silk, trimmed with white fur, clasped a cloak, and followed Sansa and Davos down torchlit stairwells. As they walked, she thought of the weight each choice bore. One misstep could fracture the tenuous peace. The solar's long table held maps, ledgers, sealed letters. Jon stood at the head, armor half-laced, black hair damp from a quick wash. Lords Mormont, Glover, Serwyn, and Corbray already argued, their voices weaving over each other like clashing swords. Brienne loomed near the door, arms folded. Jon raised a hand for silence as Margaery, Sansa, and Davos entered. The lords settled, though eyes flicked to Margaery with mixed respect. "We have news from White Harbor," Jon began. "Manderly's outriders confirm sellsword companies massing at the Trident under false banners. likely funded by Lannister gold. Lord Glover slammed a fist. Let us ride south and crush them before they strike the neck. And leave our coasts bare? Lord Serwyn countered. The Ironborn raid with impunity. My fishermen drag nets only in daylight, and even then they fear. Lyanna Mormont, perched on a high chair, glowered. We defend both sea and land. The North is no stranger to hardship. Margaery cleared her throat softly. Eyes turned. Resourcefulness wins battles, she said. But resources win wars. Coin flows as freely as blood. House Tyrell stands ready to supply grain, timber, and silver to equip additional garrisons. We propose establishing supply depots at Moat Cailin and Seaguard. Fortify the bottlenecks. Then so. Lord Serwyn frowned. A southern purse strings northern defense? Davos leaned forward. A purse shared by king and queen. The gold will be spent here, under northern command. Jon nodded. House Glover will oversee the moat. Lord Corbray, you'll coordinate with Seaguard's Lady Mallister. Davos draft letters authorizing Tyrell funds for material. Lyanna lifted her chin. And who rides south to the Twins? I will, Jon said. With a small host. Enough to show strength without stripping Winterfell. Brienne, you will command my household guard. Ser Jorah will remain to keep order. Now? Margaery's heart thudded. She met Jon's eyes. Silent question. He offered a subtle nod. Trust me. She inhaled, steadying air. Then we have our plan, Jon concluded. Prepare within the week. The lords dispersed amid murmurs. Sansa lingered beside Margaery. He means to carry Wolf and Rose into the Riverlands. And plant them both, Margaery said. We must ensure they grow. That evening, Margaery found Jon in the Godswood, kneeling before the heart tree. The sun sank in blood-orange slashes across the horizon, staining the faces carved in bleached bark. She approached quietly. Ghost lay nearby, head resting on paws. Jon rose when she drew near. I thought you'd be at supper. I lost taste for spiced mutton. She brushed snow from a mossy root. You intend to ride in 5 days? Yes. Will you take me? She steadied her voice, though the question strained her composure. Jon's gaze softened. The Riverlands will be uncertain. Ambush, disease, politics. I have endured all three. She stepped closer. You wed not a timid flower but a rose with thorns. Let me accompany you. The Reach never feared to till fertile soil, and the trident is the realm's breadbasket. My presence may sway wavering lords. He considered the heart tree. Scarlet sap glistening. If it turns violent, I cannot shield you from every blade. I do not demand invulnerability, only partnership. She reached to touch his hand. Divide and exhaust, remember. We remain strongest together. He laced his fingers with hers. Very well, you'll ride beside me. He drew a breath heavy with pine. But promise caution. I promise wisdom. She said, smiling. 5 dawns later, Winterfell's courtyard bustled with clanking armor and stamping horses. Snow had melted into treacherous slush. Stable hands laid fresh straw to keep mounts sure-footed. Jon wore black-ringed mail under a doublet of charcoal wool. Over it he fastened a new cloak. A white wolf rampant on a field of green roses stitched by Winterfell's seamstresses. Margaery, mounting a chestnut palfrey, donned matching cloak lined in sable. Davos rode at the king's right, Brienne at the queen's left. Behind them a column of 300 spears unfurled, stark pennants fluttering alongside banners, bearing golden roses bound with silver thread. Sansa stood atop the battlements, Ghost at her side. The dire wolf's howl split the air as the gate groaned open. Jon lifted his hand. Sansa waved a pale glove in farewell. Then the column moved, hooves splashing through the thaw as they filed across the drawbridge and down the King's Road, metal glinting in early sun. The journey south carried the retinue through fields, where new grass thrust stubborn shoots between stubborn snowdrifts. Villagers emerged from cottages to gape at the procession, their king and queen riding neck and neck, flanked by towering Brienne and weathered Davos. Children pointed at the rose banners. An old man bowed. tears silvering his beard. Jon returned each greeting with solemn nods, while Margaery coaxed smiles, tossing coins to a boy who limped along the ditch, sending him scrambling with delight. At dusk, they reached the ruins of a small sept near the Fever River, long deserted since Gregor Clegane's foray years earlier. There they made camp. Jon walked perimeter with his captains, marking sentry posts. Margaery visited the infirmary tents, where the maester inventoried leeches and dried willow bark. She asked after each soldier's comfort, ensuring bedrolls and hot broth. Brienne watched, brow softening. Later, Jon found Margaery seated on a fallen tree, unbraiding her hair in the fire's glow. He sat beside her, offering a tin cup of mulled wine. They drank in silence, flickering flames painting shifting gold on their faces. "I have been thinking," she murmured, twisting a strand between fingers, "of the future we forge. When war recedes, what remains? Fields." Jon stared into ember sparks floating skyward. Homes to rebuild, widows to comfort. He hesitated. Children, perhaps. A blush warmed her cheeks. "Is that something you wish?" "I have learned to want carefully," he admitted. "But yes, a life beyond thrones and shields." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then we'll build that life." Firelight danced across her eyes. "But first, we must weather the storm." Jon draped his cloak around them both. "Together," he echoed. Crossing into the neck, the company slowed. Marshland swallowed the road in stretches, forcing detours along raised berms where reeds rustled like whispers. These swamps reeked of decay and secrets. Even the horses snorted uneasily. Cranagmen scouts emerged from the mists, green-clad, reed-mask faces, saluting curtly before melting back into bogs. They guided the column through safe narrows, past black pools that slurped hungrily at hooves. Nights rang with the croak of frogs and distant wolf howls. On the fourth night within the neck, rain lashed the camp. Tents flapped, embers hissed out. Jon paced the lines, water slicking his hair. Brienne and Davos followed, lanterns bobbing. Thunder boomed as if giants clashed overhead. Suddenly, shouts erupted near the western pickets. Steel clanged. A horn brayed thrice. Attack from riverside. Jon drew Longclaw, sprinting through mud toward the commotion. Lightning flashed, revealing dark figures leaping the berm. Blades gleaming, tabards bearing no sigil. Sellswards. Stark spears met them, but numbers pressed. Jon plunged into fray, parrying a curved scimitar, riposting clean across the attacker's thigh. Rain blurred vision, thunder muffled cries. Another raider lunged. Arrows sprouted from his eye as Davos' archers loosed. Brienne waded into melee, great swords sweeping arcs of death. From the command tent, Margaery emerged clad in boiled leather and mailshirt, cloak sodden. She seized a fallen spear and hurried toward an embankment where wounded men sagged. Ignoring Brienne's shout to stay back, she crouched among soldiers, applying bandages, directing stretcher-bearers through quagmire. A sellsword broke through lines, charging toward the queen, dagger raised. Margaery pivoted, spear leveled. Her palms shook, but she held ground. Before blade touched her, Ghost barreled from the gloom, fangs flashing. The direwolf clamped on the attacker's arm, wrenching him to the mud. Jon, having seen, carved a path and reached her side. Together they watched Ghost snarl until the sellsword fell silent. At length the raiders broke, slipping into marsh like shadows. Trumpets signaled pursuit, ceased to avoid losing men in muck. Rain slackened, revealing strewn bodies and churned mud dark with blood. Jon turned to Margaery, eyes wide with terror now that danger passed. "You could have been killed. And how many more had no healer?" She pressed a hand to his cheek. Raindrops mingling with tears she hadn't known fell. "I will not sit idle while men die for us." He drew her into an embrace, heedless of armor scraping armor. Ghost circled, ears twitching. Brienne jogged up, sword dripping. "The lines hold. Captain says 24 raiders slain, others fled. Losses: 7 dead, 11 wounded." She glanced at Margaery's mud-caked boots with reluctant respect. "We owe healing to the queen." Margaery managed a tremulous smile. We all owe lives to the direwolf. Ghost huffed, nose nudging her thigh. Jon ruffled the wolf's fur, gratitude heavy in the gesture. Through the night, they buried the dead in shallow graves, marking crosses of willow. Jon spoke quiet words over each. Margaery placed wilted marsh lilies atop the mounds. Dawn rose gray, the camp weary but unbroken. By mid-morning, scouts returned with grim trophies. Crimson-sashed armbands stitched from Lannister cloth. Proof from whom the gold flowed. Jon gathered his commanders beneath dripping pines. The enemy probes our resolve, he said, voice raw. They found us resolute. Davos unfurled a damp map. Dewa. We're a day's march from Moat Cailin. Stone, not swampland. Hold there. Fortify until reinforcements arrive. Brienne agreed. Sel's words fear walls more than blades. Margaery, still pale from the night's horror, pointed at river routes south of the moat. If we dam these channels, raiders cannot navigate narrow boats to flank us. Jon squeezed her shoulder. See to it. We move at first light. Moat Cailin emerged from morning mist like jagged teeth. 3 towers half collapsed, surrounding walls sunken into bog. Yet still the gateway between north and south. Jon's column approached under white banners. Defenders raised horns and opened gates. Inside, masons toiled to shore weakened battlements, while smiths hammered arrowheads. Lord Glover greeted them, brow furrowed with worry until he learned of the attack. Then it knotted deeper. Rumors reached us, Glover said, leading Jon to the tallest tower's parapet. Frey riders circle twins mustering. And ravens from Seaguard speak of sell-sail galleys anchored off Fair Market. Jon stared across endless reeds shimmering beneath watery sun. Cersei cast seeds of war, hoping some sprout. Margaery joined them, wind tugging her cloak. Then we burn the weeds before they root. She had spent the afternoon with engineers, directing construction of log dams along tributaries. Crannogmen wove reed nets to snare hulls. Her cheeks flushed with exertion, but her eyes shone. That evening, the great hall of Moat Cailin, long unused, filled with soldiers clambering onto rough benches. Cookfires stewed turnips and salt pork, barrels of smallfolk ale tapped. Jon addressed them from a dais. We stand not merely for north or reach, but for a realm free of fear. We do this together. His words echoed under vaulted beams, met with thunderous hammering of tankards. Margaery followed. She spoke softer, but her voice carried. Gold bought the blades that attacked us. Our bond cannot be bought or broken by coin. Let Wolf and Rose prove that unity yields harvests richer than plunder. Soldiers cheered, banging fists. That night, as storms rolled distant across the horizon, Jon and Margaery stood atop the tower. Lanterns dotted the camp below. Jon wrapped arms around her. That speech, he murmured, chin resting on her hair, won hearts. They were ready to believe, she answered. We only gave them words. He turned her gently. You gave them hope. And you gave them courage. She lifted his hand to her lips, kissing scarred knuckles. Lightning flickered far south, framing storm clouds like torn mountains. Margaery shivered despite the warm night. War gathers. Let it, Jon said. We gather too. Weeks slipped into rhythm. Fortify. Scout. Skirmish. Raiders tested dams but found drowned channels. Frey outriders rallied, then dispersed when Stark longbowmen harried them from tree lines. Supplies flowed from Winterfell and from Highgarden. Grain in hemp sacks, barrels of lamp oil, bundles of quarrels damped with rose. At dusk, campfires ringed the moat like constellations fallen to earth. Jon rode patrols daily, Ghost loping ahead. He spoke with farmers returning to ruined crofts, promising timber grants, with blacksmiths forging nails from scavenged iron, promising coin. Margaery oversaw infirmaries, taught hedgewives, reach salves, penned letters to Lady Mallister and Sir Edmure Tully in Lannister captivity, urging unity. Brienne drilled archers. Davos mapped supply lines. One sultry afternoon, a horn sounded thrice. Riders approaching under flag of truce. Jon and Davos descended to the outer yard where dust swirled in scorching wind. 5 horsemen emerged. Standard-bearer, holding a pale banner emblazoned with entwined red lion and black stag. The sigil of House Baratheon, long defaced by Lannister graft. Ahead rode a woman armored in gold plate, helm crowned with stag antlers. When she dismounted, auburn hair spilled like blood over steel. She removed her gauntlet, revealing a ring carved of yellow jade. Sir Brienne's eyes widened. Lady Baratheon. Margaery, standing by Jon's side, whispered, The woman bowed. Shireen Baratheon, daughter of King Stannis, though titles ring hollow these days. Her voice bore the rasp of one long-denied courtesy. I come seeking alliance. Jon stepped forward. Your father fought for justice. His daughter is welcome among us. He offered hospitality. She accepted with graceful nod. That night, candlelight flickered in the tower chamber as Shireen spoke. She had escaped Dragonstone after Stannis' defeat, hidden years among Stormland peasants, gathering loyalists disenchanted with Cersei's cruelty. Now she commanded a modest host, 1,000 stag-clad spears, and sought banner under which to march. My father taught that duty is heavier than a crown, she said, cowed cheek catching shadow. The Iron Throne reeks of blood and lies. If you stand for realm, the stag stands with you. Jon exchanged glance with Margaery. The Rose Queen saw opportunity. Stormland's grain fields, ports on Shipbreaker Bay, a shared grudge against Lannister rule. Bonds thickened. They clasped hands over Maester's parchment, signing compacts sealed with driftwood wax. Wolf, rose, stag entwined. Soon after, ravens beat frantic wings across the dusk, delivering tidings from Seaguard. The Golden Company landed at Maidenpool with war elephants, Lannister banners flying above mercenary ranks. Lord Glover's cousin reported sighting 20,000 foot and 300 horse. Panic might have rippled through the moat, but news of Baratheon reinforcement steadied hearts. Council convened by torchlight. Maps sprawled across tables, wine cups forgotten. Brienne traced elephant icons along roads from Maidenpool. They'll march west, cross the Trident, push to River Run, then north through the Twins. She warned. We must hold the crossings, Davos said. Jon studied the map. I. Sir Brynden Blackfish once described a tactic. Hammer from the north, anvil in the south. We have the stag for the south flank. Shireen leaned in. We strike from Storm's End, raid supply depots. Lannister elephants starve without fodder. Margaery tapped River Run. If Edmure can muster, he blocks them at the Red Fork. Edmure remains captive, Davos reminded. Not for long, Jon resolved. We free him. That night, as stars burned cold above marshes, Jon and Margaery lay awake on a narrow cot in the tower chamber. Candle stubs guttered on the sill, casting shifting gold across wooden beams. Do you fear? She asked softly, tracing a scar on his chest. I fear many things, he admitted. That my choices lead good men to graves. That dragons return fire to fields. But I do not fear standing with you. She pressed her lips to the scar. I once believed I must chase crowns to shape the world. Now I see change wrought in small mercies. A bandage, a bowl of stew, a word of hope. You taught me that. Then now. And you taught me that mercy must be funded, he said, smiling weakly. And adorned so people see it. They intertwined fingers. Rain drummed faint against shutter. Sleep claimed them at last, dreams mingling brave and grim. At dawn a rider from White Harbor arrived, horse lathered, tunic crusted with salt spray. In the courtyard he fell to one knee before Brienne. A fleet approaches, he choked. Sails of black and red dragons. Within the hour, council reconvened. The rider's tale. Dozens of great ships, triple-masted, hulls lacquered dark, bearing sigils of House Targaryen. Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal, the monsters of myth, circling above like living storms. They anchored off White Harbor, but made no assault. Instead, the dragons wheeled overhead while a single skiff rode ashore. The council hissed with speculation. Davos' eyes glinted. The Dragon Queen crosses at last. Margaery's pulse thumped. She studied Jon's face. A blend of resolve and unnamed dread. He set jaw. I must go to White Harbor. Davos shook his head. You're needed here. Peace cannot be forged solely by steel, Jon replied. If Daenerys seeks alliance, or demands fealty, we meet her openly. Margaery placed a hand atop his. Then we go together. Brienne objected, citing danger. Shireen offered to ride in King's stead, but Jon insisted. By dusk, they set forth with small escort. Davos, Brienne, Ghost, leaving Shireen to command Moat Cailin. The ride would take 3 days, hammering through sodden forests and rolling downs. Storm clouds gathered, but they pressed on beneath standards of Wolf and Rose. White Harbor bustled under gray skies, masts bobbing along the Deepwater quay. Atop the harbor wall, Lord Wyman Manderly waited, cloak whipped by sea wind. He greeted Jon and Margaery with reverence, then guided them through narrow streets where fisherfolk paused mid-net mending to gape at the direwolf striding beside their king. At the new keep's great hall, banners of House Manderly hung beside a blank crimson field, space reserved for a guest's colors. Flame crackled in broad hearths, warding sea chill. There, upon a dais, Daenerys Stormborn awaited, hair pale as moonlight, braided with silver rings, garbed in quilted dragon-scale leather. At her shoulder perched Missandei, eyes assessing. Grey Worm and Unsullied stood silent along walls. Jon ascended first, cloak sodden and travel-stained. He stopped 4 paces short, removed his gloves, and bowed. Margaery mirrored him elegantly. Daenerys inclined her head. Acknowledgement, not capitulation. Your Grace, Jon began, voice steady. I am Jon Snow, King in the North. And this is my queen, Margaery Tyrell Snow. Daenerys studied them. I know you by reputation. Whisperers speak of a wolf riding south on winter winds. Her gaze flicked to Margaery. The Reach's Lady of Roses, married now to Northern Ice. A bold union. Margaery responded with a courteous nod. House Tyrell seeks harmony across Westeros. Daenerys' lips curved faintly. Harmony often follows fire. She rose, stepping forward. I come not as conqueror, but as liberator. Cersei Lannister's tyranny festers. We share cause. Jon exchanged glance with Margaery. Our scouts report Golden Company landing on her behalf. We prepare to resist. Then let us combine strength. Daenerys lifted her chin. I propose alliance sealed by oath. The North remains free, yet pledges arms against the Iron Throne. In return, I uphold your sovereignty. And your dragons? Jon asked quietly. They burn only tyrants' chains. She paused. I ask dragonglass from the north. Rumors say your mountains brim with it. I will need weapons forged to end dead things creeping beyond the wall. Margaery raised eyebrows. Dead things? Jon felt chills slither his spine. Visions of blue-eyed corpses from nights at the wall surged. The threat is real, he confirmed. White Walkers gather. If we fail to stop them, the realm falls before Cersei is even dust. Daenerys' gaze hardened. Then we battle 2 wars, one for life itself, the other for rule. United we stand. Jon extended a hand. Let us write pact. Daenerys clasped it, dragon and wolf sealing promise. Margaery placed her hand atop theirs, rose scent mingling with salt wind. 3 symbols interlocked, ice, fire and bloom. Against the dim roar of sea, negotiations stretched into candlelit hours. Missandei transcribed accords. Davos argued clauses. Margaery bridged divides, suggesting equitable grain distribution, refugee corridors, shared smithcraft for obsidian blades. When Quill scratched final signature, weary smiles broke. A messenger burst into hall near midnight. Ironborn raiders sighted torching villages along Stony Shore, driving inland. Euron, striking while northern leaders away. Jon cursed softly. Daenerys' eyes flared. My fleet will hunt his. She vowed. Drogon's fire quenches those flames. Jon nodded. Gratitude etched. Manderley's longships guide you through shoals. Plans spun into motion. Unsullied to garrison White Harbor. Dothraki scouts to sweep coastal forests. Targaryen smiths to commence forging dragonglass at Seal Rock. Alliances no longer parchment, but living sinew. Days later, as Jon and Margaery prepared to depart for Moat Cailin, Daenerys summoned them atop the harbor tower. Morning sun struck waves to blinding silver. Above, Drogon banked, colossal wings stirring ocean air. I would speak plainly, Daenerys said. Old Valyria believed Dragonfire tempered stronger steel. I believe hearts forge stronger kingdoms. I sense in you both the alloy of compassion and resolve. Do not squander it. Then, Jon inclined his head. We will not. Margaery touched Daenerys' arm. Nor will we forget this aid. A distant horn sounded. Unsullied call to arms as ships unfurled sails stamped with silver krakens. War met alliance on rolling tide, but hope soared on draconic wings. The return ride north crackled with urgency. Ravens flew ahead bearing news. Roads bustled with troops relocating under the Alliance's banner. Jon and Margaery paused one night at a small holdfast where sweetgrass scented the fields. They slept little, discussing strategies. Shireen's flank, Edmure's rescue, dragonglass, transport. Yet beneath it throbbed deeper connection. In each glance they shared knowledge that their partnership pivoted history. Before dawn, Margaery slipped from bed, wrapped in cloak, stepping outside to dewy meadow. Fog clung to earth like spilled milk. She stared east where sky blushed with first light. Footsteps approached. Jon enveloped her from behind, warm. What do you see? He asked. Possibility, she whispered. And peril. She turned in his arms. But I see us too, standing at its center, unbroken. He kissed her brow. Then we endure. A lark trilled, mist shifted. They watched sun climb, golden disk scattering night. Two silhouettes amid fog, forging dawn for a battered realm. At Moat Cailin, Shireen welcomed them with urgent news. Edmure Tully smuggled from Casterly Rock by sympathizers, making slow escape north along Blue Fork. Cersei spies close behind. Jon convened war council. Plans hatched for swift riders to intercept and escort Edmure to River Run, sparking Riverland uprising. Brienne volunteered to lead, Davos to navigate. Margaery insisted archers disguised as traders accompany supply wagons as cover. Jon consented, with reluctant admiration. Brienne knelt to Margaery before departure. You stood brave against Sellswords. She clasped the queen's wrist. I vow to return Lord Tully safely, by steel or by my life. Margaery squeezed back. Return by life. We have need of your honor. Dai. Dawn saw Brienne's party ride south. Hooves thundering across reed causeways, spectral in mist. In following weeks, word spread like wildfire on summer wind. Edmure free, Riverland banners fluttering. Targaryen fleet burning Ironborn raiders. Golden Company trapped in river crossings harassed by Baratheon guerrillas. Winter grain caravans moving north under Tyrell coin. Realm trembled on cusp of upheaval, but hope flickered, nurtured by improbable union. Within Moat Cailin's central tower, Jon and Margaery pored over dispatches, candles guttering low. When exhaustion dulled vision, Margaery stood, stretched, moved behind Jon to knead his shoulders. He leaned back, sigh escaping. You carry weight of worlds. She murmured. So do you. He caught her hand, kissed knuckles. I thought myself alone with ghosts. Then you arrived. She smiled faintly. We all haunt our own halls until we invite light? He rose, pulling her into arms. Thunder rumbled outside. Rain pattered roof. They danced slow circles. Silent. As storm drummed, duties receded, leaving only breath and heartbeat. A fortnight later, Brienne returned triumphant. Edmure installed at River Run, Blackfish's veterans rallying, Frey scattering. Jon embraced her like brother. Margaery presented silk banners, wolf, trout, rose entwined, to cement tri-alliance. Sir Edmure's letter pledged grain, men, and river barges to ferry dragonglass shipments. Yet victories carried cost. Reports filtered of massacres near Harrenhal, Golden Company retaliating on innocent hamlets. Children put to sword. Margaery received the scroll, hands trembling as she read names of dead. Tears brimmed, but anger burned through. She found Jon on battlements, staring into storm sky. They butchered farmers, she said, voice hoarse. Women and babes. Jon's jaw clenched. We ride tonight. Bring justice. She placed a hand on his armor. Justice without mercy breeds endless cycle. We punish guilty, yes, but we heal wounded villages. I will go with healers and grain. He met her gaze, saw ferocity. I will not put you in harm's path again. My place is where lives need mending. She cupped his cheek. If you cannot accept that, you do not accept me. Pain flashed in his eyes. Then he nodded. But we ride together. Thus banners lifted anew, marching toward flames licking Harrenhal's distant spires. Night cloaked the column, torches bobbing like fireflies. They rode side by side, storm clouds massing. Ahead, destiny unfolded. Not as iron crown nor easy peace, but an ever-shifting tapestry woven by their intertwined choices. Jon thought of dreams burning ships, Margaery of roses rooting through stone. They had become each other's compass, guiding through dark waters toward uncertain dawn. And though thunder growled, they faced horizon unafraid, certain only of the power in two hands clasped against the chill. Behind them, hoofbeats drummed anthem of alliance. Wolf pacing beside Rose, dragon soaring overhead, stag charging at flank, trout leaping in wake. Westeros trembled, poised between ruin and rebirth. Yet somewhere beneath wars and crowns and long nights, seeds of gentler tomorrow found soil. In the hush between thunderclaps, Margaery whispered to Jon, "We endure." Jon squeezed her hand. "We bloom." And their horses galloped into tempest, banners streaming, a promise written large against stormlit sky. Yeah. Ha. Rain sheeted across the desolate plains that hemmed Harrenhal, hissing as it met the embers of charred farmsteads spread like blackened teeth in the mud. Ash whirled on the wind and clung to armor and wool alike. It coated throats with the taste of burnt grain and bone. As twilight bled into a starless night, Jon Snow reined his destrier atop a low rise overlooking the devastation. Torches bobbed in the distance, columns of Stark, Tyrell, and Tully men-at-arms marching through stubble fields toward the ruined towers, whose melted stones loomed against flickers of lightning. The air stank of smoke and something fouler, the iron tang of fresh grief. Margaery drew her palfrey beside Jon's mount, cloak plastered to her shoulders, curls dripping rainwater down her cheeks. She stared at the wreckage with wide, stricken eyes. Charcoal silhouettes of wagons lay overturned where small folk had tried to flee. Beyond, the gutted ribs of a barn jutted skyward, still glowing dull red where beams smoldered. No lowing of cattle, no barking of dogs. Only wind keening through hollow doorframes. Jon spoke softly, as though voice alone might reopen wounds. Scouts report 20 farms burned in 2 days. Golden Company outriders, company of 300 under Sir Miles Toyne's command. His jaw flexed. He ordered it done to teach river rats proper fealty. Teach? Margaery's tone cracked like ice. He butchered unarmed tenants. Lightning forked overhead, briefly illuminating her expression. Sorrow fused with tempered fury. Jon reached to clasp her gloved hand. She squeezed back hard, as if anchoring herself to purpose. Behind them, Davos marshaled companies into orderly lines, while trumpeters gave terse calls. Shireen Baratheon's stag-bannered host arrayed on the right, shields bright in the storm's glare. Archmaesters might have applauded the symmetry. Here it felt only like the cruel geometry of war. Jon signaled Ser Jorah Mormont, returned from Daenerys' fleet, to ride forward. Together they muttered final orders, pike blocks to form hedgehog around supply wagons, mounted archers to circle through weed-choked orchards and cut off retreats. Brienne of Tarth tightened her gauntlets beside the queen, blue mantle drooping under downpour. She would remain by Margaery's side, blade at the ready should battle seep amidst the healers. Hold back our surgeons until the ground's secured. Margaery instructed the maester assigned to her retinue. Then spread to every hut, every ditch. No child lies alone tonight. The healer nodded, rain bouncing on his balding pate. He gathered apprentices, armed with leather satchels of salve, saws, and poppy. Thunder boomed. Jon raised Longclaw, its pale blade catching a momentary glint of lightning. Horns answered, wolf howls of brass that rolled across the wet flats. The allied column advanced, boots splashing, banners snapping like wet sails. Jon rode at its van, ghost pacing ghost white at his stirrup, despite the din, eyes aflame with predatory light. The first resistance came where a hedgerow marked the edge of a tenant field. Golden Company scouts crouched behind tumbled stone walls. Crossbows cocked by-dot. Stark outriders spurred forward. Shields interlocked overhead in a move drilled since Moat Cailin. A knotted turtle that shrugged off volleys. Arrows clattered uselessly. Stark lancers thundered through a breach, spears finding gaps in half-buckled mail. One mercenary spun, tried to cast down arms, but a Riverlander militiaman, face streaked with soot, drove a pitchfork into his gut before mercy could be granted. Grief made judges of peasants today. Jon pressed deeper. The slope dipped toward a shallow brook, where smoke writhed in eddies. His horse balked at a corpse that lay twisted across the path. A girl no older than 4, small body swaddled in a blanket now soaked and dark. Her eyes stared skyward, reflecting lightning. Jon dismounted, kneeling beside her in the muck. Rain spattered her hollow cheeks. He shut her eyes, lips moving in wordless prayer, then lifted the tiny form and carried her beyond the lane to a patch of unburnt grass. There, gentle Sam, formerly a septon before tragedy stripped his faith to quiet kindness, approached with trembling hands. Jon laid the child in his arms, then rose, face unreadable, but for the storm raging behind his eyes. By the time he remounted, fury had settled into diamond clarity. He signaled Captain Karen's arbalisters to split left and sweep ruined granaries where resistance stiffened. Volley after volley hissed through rain, quarrels punching through rust-flaked brigandines. The mercenaries faltered, broke. Riverlanders surged with cudgels and sickles, but Jon ordered horns to hold them back. Capture, not slaughter. Prisoners knelt, wrists bound, heads bowed beneath torchlight. Yet Sir Miles and the main Golden Company cohort still occupied Harrenhal's outer bailey. There, charred doors half hung on molten hinges. Murder holes dripped black pitch residue. The keep, vast as a mountain of fused slag, glimmered dreadfully whenever lightning streaked above. To assault such a place at night, in rain, would cost dear. Jon knew, and yet delay invited further atrocities. He called Margaery forward to shelter behind a wagon barricade. She arrived astride her palfrey, robes plastered. Between them, rain hammered canvas as they studied sketches of Harrenhal drawn by scouts. "There is a postern gate on the north wall," Jon said, finger tracing wet parchment. "Collapsed stones form a ramp. Small team could breach, unbar the main portcullis. Too great a risk for you," she argued, voice low yet steady. "Send volunteers. You command whole armies now. What commander sends men where he will not go?" Jon challenged, though warmth softened the rebuke. Margaery's eyes glistened with rain and something else. "Then take those who know your mind best." She turned, beckoned. Davos stepped alongside, Brienne with him, rain-slick helm tucked beneath one arm. Grey Worm, recently arrived with a detachment of unsullied escorting obsidian ingots, saluted crisp, speechless acceptance. Jorah Mormont volunteered before being asked. Within the hour, under cloak of thunder, Jon's strike band sloshed north across marshy ground. Ghost padded ahead, white hide a blur in darkness. They clambered amid fallen masonry where ivy sprouted from cracks like serpents. Overhead, towers melted by dragonfire centuries ago loomed as jagged silhouettes. At the fallen postern, a single lantern flickered beyond rusted grates. Mercenary sentry, Davos gestured. Grey worms stalked forward, blade whisper, swift. A gasp, a thud. The lantern tipped, extinguished. Inside, corridors gaped like throat of some colossal beast. Water dripped. Rats fled their intrusion. Jon led through labyrinthine passages until portcullis winch room materialized. 2 guards dozed near brazier. Too much wine. Jorah felled one with pommel blow. Brienne's mailed fist crushed the other's windpipe before a cry escaped. Davos set to work on the great wheel, while Grey Worm jammed a wedge beneath iron teeth so they would not clang down prematurely. Jon watched hallways, Longclaw ready. Chains rattled. The portcullis creaked upward. Outside, horns blared. Signal to storm forward. Allied columns poured through the breach, filling courtyard like floodwaters. Sir Miles Toyne, silver hair plastered to brow, rallied his men atop broken steps. "The bastard wolf dares my gate," he roared, voice ringing. "Gold and glory." Sel's words echoed, forming shield wall. Jon emerged, rain dripping from curls, lightning flashing across the Valyrian steel of Longclaw. "There is no glory in murder of babes," he called. "Yield or die." Toyne spat, raised tulwar. Archers loosed at Jon, but Brienne stepped before him, shield broad as door. Arrows thudded, sliding off. Unsullied advanced in lockstep, spears bristling. From parapets, Tyrell crossbowmen fired down. The cell wall shivered. Duel-ended tension. Toyne charged, screaming some mother tongue curse. Jon met him halfway. Steel rang dotto. Toyne's tulwar slashed in wicked arcs, but Longclaw drank rain and moonlight, parrying, riposting. Jon felt each impact up his arm. Toyne strong, seasoned in Stepstone's wars. Yet rage lent Jon power. Memory of the little girl honed each strike. He disarmed Toyne with sudden bind, kicked knee, drove pommel into jaw. Toyne reeled. Jon thrust clean into chainmail gap beneath collarbone. Valyrian edge parted flesh like parchment. Toyne gasped, dropped to knees. Rain washing blood in rivulets. Jon pulled blade free. Toyne collapsed. The cell wall buckled, men throwing shields aside. Grey Worm shouted for surrender. Dozens fell prostrate. Some attempted flight. Archers felled them. Silence settled, broken only by distant thunder and groans of wounded. Jon lowered sword, chest heaving. Brienne touched his elbow. Margaery approaches. Through the mud she strode, flanked by healers bearing torches. Smoke curled from buildings still smoldering. She surveyed courtyard, eyes lingering on Toyne's corpse, then on infants' swaddling cloths nailed grotesquely to a post. Trophies of fear. She swallowed hard, composed herself, and addressed prisoners. "You sought to terrify. Know instead compassion's weight." She signaled surgeons forward. "Tend the wounded of both sides. No retribution on the helpless. Justice will come by truth's daylight." And some Riverlanders bristled. Demand for blood hot. But Jon's voice cut through. "Obey your queen." They obeyed. Fires were doused, makeshift infirmaries erected beneath tattered awnings. Margaery knelt beside a dying sellsword whose lungs rattled with blood. She cradled his head, offered water, and whispered of fields in Lys where poppies bloomed. He wept, thanked her, passed. She closed his eyes. Around her others witnessed and felt bruising shame. Through the raw hours before dawn, they labored, carting bodies for burial, erecting pyres when ground proved too sodden, cattlaging survivors for ransom. Edmure's men distributed bread from wagons. Crannog soup pots simmered with turnip and rabbit. Stormlander smiths mended bent spears. By sunrise, the stench of smoke fused with that of wet straw and boiled groats. The smell of life clawing return. John found Margaery seated upon a crate, rinsing blood from her hands in a wooden bowl. Her shoulders sagged under weight unseen. When he approached, she looked up, offering tired smile. "We saved some," she whispered. "More than would have lived," he answered, voice hoarse. She gestured to rays of morning sun piercing cloud, painting the melted spires gold. "Do you think these stones remember when Harren the Black died screaming?" "They remember Dragonfire," John said, easing onto a barrel opposite her. "But they also remember Aegon spared the small folk after the Conqueror's flames." He exhaled. "Let these walls remember mercy again." Margaery nodded, gaze drifting to camp where children, pulled from cellars, ate porridge. Some laughed, though eyes still wide with disbelief. She passed sleeve across her face, smudging ash. Later, council convened in a chamber where puddles formed beneath rent ceiling. Present: Jon, Margaery, Davos, Shireen, Edmure, freshly arrived with small guard. Grey Worm Brienne, Maester Luwin's successor Orwell, and Galtrey Flowers, the scion of House Tyrell's lesser branch, now quartermaster of supply caravans. They mapped next steps: rebuild homesteads, redistribute Tyrell grain, station stag and trout companies to police roads. Edmure pledged river-run smiths to craft plowshares as readily as arrowheads. But a greater threat surfaced. A raven from Eastwatch by the Sea arrived, feathers ragged from flight through storm. Jon slit seal while others watched. The parchment bore hurried script from a ranger named Borkus. Unnatural thunder beyond the wall. White shadows massing in forest. Dead rising at Hardhome once more. The Night's Watch numbered fewer than 200. They begged aid. Silence followed the reading. Rain pattering through ceiling felt louder than ever. Jon's eyes met Margaery's. The North's war for survival had never left them, merely paused amid politics. He addressed the circle. "We cannot ignore this call. If the wall falls, it matters little who sits what throne." Davos drummed fingers on table. "We've thinned forces. Marching north leaves Riverlands vulnerable." Margaery's voice rose, clear despite fatigue. "Then we delegate. Edmure secures the trident with Baratheon spears. Tyrell coin equips levies. Targaryen fleet patrols narrow sea, curbing Ironborn. Jon leads a vanguard north. Starks, free folk volunteers, unsullied, whose queen grants leave. I go as envoy, forging supply chain through the gift. Now, Brienne objected, but Margaery stood firm. "If winter devours us, I will face it beside my king." Shireen placed hand over the queen's. "Stormlands will send grain to Castle Black." Edmure bowed assent. Grey Worm, expression carved from basalt, declared 1,000 unsullied ready. Thus the council forged winter's pact. Wolf, rose, stag, trout and dragon turned northward. They would shore humanity's wall against death incarnate, while leaving Southlands guarded by alliances born of mercy rather than fear. Within the week, columns departed Harrenhal under clearing sky. Fires no longer burned behind them. New seeds lay beneath turned ash, waiting. As riders crested the ridge, Margaery looked back one last time at the melted towers. Breeze carried faint scent of wood smoke and wildflowers, a promise that charred earth might bloom again. The march toward Eastwatch stretched leagues across war-scarred realm. Autumn crept early, painting oaks rust and gold. Nights bit colder, breaths fogged. Villages greeted the host with awed curiosity. Children ran alongside wagons, shouting as unsullied drilled spear maneuvers or free folk hunters displayed antlers from recent kills. Margaery spent evenings among campfires, weaving harmony, teaching Crannog wives to churn sweet butter with Reach lavender, persuading fierce spearwives to trade furs for Riverland linen. Laughter bridged accents once separated by histories of blood. Jon, meanwhile, sparred daily with Carsey, a free folk spearwife risen as clan chief. Her wild swipes forced him to adapt. She, in turn, respected his quiet endurance. Ghost prowled perimeter, accepted tidbits from northern boys and Dothraki horse lords alike. who muttered that the pale wolf bore old souls in his gaze. On the 15th night, camp pitched near Queenscrown's crumbling tower. Moonlight silvered the pond. Reeds whispered. Jon and Margaery walked alone along the ruined bridge. Frost-rimmed timbers, their cloaks brushed. She spoke first. "Every mile north, I feel time unravel, as though the wall between myth and waking thins." Jon studied moon mirrored in black water. "It does. I once fought a man returned from death, blue eyes burning. I slew him, and the corpse at his side fell too, as if tethered." He paused, throat tight. "I fear what chains bind them now." Margaery slipped her hand into his. "Fear guides vigilance. It must not rule. We meet night with light, our courage, our compassion." She smiled ruefully. "And dragons breathing fire." He returned hint of smile. "And roses that bloom in frost." She leaned against him, gaze crossing still pond. "When we survive, and we will, I shall plant a garden at Winterfell. Reach roses interlaced with snowdrops. May it remind the realm of this march." "Damned sea." Jon kissed her brow, tasted chill dew on her skin. "I look forward to tending it." They watched moon glide westward. Silent pact, sealing heart to future beyond ice and war. Days later, white spires of the wall pierced gray horizon. Eastwatch's towers, though weather-beaten, still stood sentinel above crashing sea. From ramparts, black-clad rangers cheered at sight of banners cresting dunes. Jon's heart clenched. Homecoming to an order dwindled near extinction. Within battered hall, Borkus, rangy with wind-burned cheeks, greeted them. "Thank the gods," he rasped. "We've sighted corpses upon the shore at night. Walkers, whites, trying the ice." He gestured to fist-sized hole in wall map, where someone had stabbed dagger. "We hold torches, but our oil runs low." Margaery stepped forward with parchment. "Caravans from the gift follow, laden with pitch, obsidian arrowheads, timber for new palisades. Command them as you will." Borkus near wept. Never thought to hear such words from a Southron lady. Jon clasped Borkus's forearm. "We fight as one realm." He turned to assembly. "Unsullied, free folk, northern spears. Hear me. The enemy comes not for crowns but for beating hearts. We stand the living's last shield." Cheers broke ragged but fierce. Even the wall seemed to tremble with hope. Work began at once. Unsullied engineers repaired winch mechanisms. Free folk savvy in ice-carved trenches that funneled shamblers into kill zones. Smiths stoke Eastwatch forges, melting obsidian shards into arrowheads that gleamed midnight purple. Margaery organized infirmary, turning disused storeroom into ward smelling of pine disinfectant and fresh straw jot. Brienne drilled archers atop ramparts. Shireen's Stormlander sappers laid fire trenches charged with naphtha shipped from Dragonstone. 3 nights after arrival, horns wailed under a waxing blood-red moon. White shapes surged from tree line. Whites, dozens at first, then hundreds, shambling across frosted dunes. Their eyes glowed uncanny sapphire. Jon rushed to parapet, cloak flaring. He shouted orders. Archers loosed shafts tipped with flame and obsidian. Skeletal figures shattered, bones cracking like dry branches. Yet more pressed behind. From courtyard, Grey Worm led unsullied phalanx through Sally Port. Shields locked. Spears set. They met undead tide with disciplined thrusts. Obsidian blades, sending corpses to stillness. But numbers mounted, and behind them towered taller forms. White walkers astride dead elk. Ice blades chilling air. A piercing cry split night. Drogon's roar. Above, black wings spanned horizon as Daenerys, and her dragon swept low, torrents of flame engulfing whites. Snow hissed to steam. Rhaegal followed, emerald fire searing new path. The undead line faltered, shriveled under Dragonfire. Yet walkers raised spears of pure frost. Shards of ice whistled upward, striking Rhaegal's flank. The green dragon screamed, banking hard, blood crystallizing midair. Jon grit teeth, fists clenched on Longclaw's hilt. He turned to a signal tower where beacons waited to call Tormund's free folk reinforcements from Shadow Tower. "Light it," he commanded. Brienne raced, torch in hand. Soon flame licked high, orange against night. In distance, horns answered. On ground, a white walker advanced, pale armor gleaming. Grey Worm met him. Spear poised, but the ice blade sheared point clean off. Walker sliced again. Grey Worm parried with shield rim, but frost bit deep, splitting bronze. Jon vaulted from rampart via rope ladder, landing near, long claw arcing. Valyrian steel met ice. Clash rang like church bells. Sparks of frost and ember blossomed. Walker snarled, thrust. Jon sidestepped, riposted through collar gap, dot. Ice burst to mist. Walker shattered. Nearby wights collapsed lifeless. Margaery tended wounded along inner yard when shards of ice smashed battlement, scattering healers. She sheltered beneath overturned table. Saw a child, watch recruit scarcely 15, pinned under rubble. She crawled, heaved timber, freeing him though splinters tore her palms. He sobbed. She bound his bleeding leg with her own cloak tie. Overhead, thunderous wingbeat signaled Drogon swooping again. Flames whooshed, painting Margaery's face gold. Hours stretched like years until first light peeked over Eastern Sea. The undead withdrew in ragged trickle, leaving heaps of smoldering corpses that steamed in dawn cold. Eastwatch's defenders stood amid carnage, chests heaving, weapons nicked, losses counted. 15 unsullied, 12 free folk, 7 brothers of the Watch, 2 Stormlanders. Rhaegal wounded but alive, crouched on cliff ledge while Daenerys spoke soothing Valyrian. Jon walked rampart, blood and soot streaked, to find Margaery kneeling beside row of bodies draped in black cloaks. She pressed a kiss to each brow, whispering names. He knelt opposite, touching her shoulder. She leaned into him, tears mixed with grime. "We held," she murmured. "But this is only beginning." He nodded, gaze distant beyond frosted plain where sun rose pale. "Night King will come with storm enough to swallow dawn. We must forge every soul into blade." He paused. "I want you safe behind wall when that happens." She lifted her head, eyes blazing despite tears. "I did not march north to cower behind stone. I will not leave." Jon exhaled shaky breath. "I knew you'd say so." He took her dirt-smeared hands. "Then we stand side by side. And bloom." She echoed softly. Weeks passed in fever of preparation. Obsidian forges glowed day and night. Archers practiced by moonlight. Tyrell and Baratheon quartermasters established relay lines. Wagons bearing salted pork, lamp oil, arrow shafts. Linen? Ravens flew hourly between Eastwatch and Dragonstone, charting dragon patrols. Tormund arrived with 500 giants-blooded warriors, thumping chests in greeting. Even Night's Watch cynics admitted never before had such disparate peoples toiled for common cause. One brittle dawn, Daenerys convened war council in Eastwatch's mess hall. Long trestle tables, crowded by maps, weighted with stones. Jon, Margaery, Davos, Tormund, Grey Worm, Sam Tarly, newly arrived with scrolls from Old Town, and others ringed around. Sam spread a cracked parchment depicting spiral sigil found north of Frostfangs. Fresh report from Rangers. "They gather here," Sam explained, finger on half-frozen lake. "Ice thick enough to support host. But if dragons crack it, countless wights drown." Daenerys frowned. "Risky. Dragons vulnerable to spears of ice." Jon considered. "We lure Vanguard across lake, then break ice with Dragonfire. Unsullied hold causeway. Free folk harry flanks, archers target walkers. Then wow." Margaery tapped supply ledger. "We can fashion floating fire pots, pitch sealed in clay. Scatter across surface. One spark from Dragonfire will turn lake into boiling pit." Davos raised brows. "Reach ingenuity." Jon met Daenerys's gaze. She nodded approval. "We strike before winter deepens further. Thus Operation Breakfang hatched. 3 nights before March, camp hushed beneath aurora shimmering green and violet across heavens. Jon wandered parapet, weighed by solemn anticipation. He found Margaery in silent Godswood. Eastwatch's small cluster of wind-gnarled weirwoods clinging to cliff edge. Snow-dusted branches, red leaves shivered. She knelt, fingers entwined, whispering something lost on sea wind. When finished, she looked up, surprised to see him. "I was asking old gods to remember names of those who die nameless," she said. She rose, brushing snow from gown. Jon offered half-smile. "They will. The weirwood remembers." They walked to cliff verge where ocean pounded rocks far below, plumes of white spray illuminated by northern lights. The wind cut, but together they stood warm. "Do you regret?" Jon asked quietly. "Regret?" she repeated. "Leaving gardens of Highgarden, trading perfumed courts for death's doorstep." She considered, lashes snow-dusted. "When I first arrived at Winterfell, I admired its strength, but feared losing myself to its starkness. Yet I found greater self here amid ruin. Each act of mercy, each sacrifice. These are seeds truer than any rose cultivated in greenhouse." Her voice softened. "And you are soil rich enough to grow them." Jon swallowed, heart hammering. He withdrew small object from cloak. Ring of simple steel, forged from wall's fallen chain link, set with chip of obsidian polished smooth. "I have no goldsmith," he said, "but I would see you wear this when battle comes, so I may remember why I fight." Her breath hitched. She extended hand. He slid ring onto finger slick with cold. It fit perfect. She smiled, tears shimmering. Then she reached into bodice, drew slender chain bearing emblem carved of weirwood, direwolf and rose intertwined. "I shaped this from branch felled by storm," she said. "Carry it, so you never forget who stands beside you." He clasped pendant tight, throat thick. They embraced, snow swirling around like silent benediction. That night they lay together in narrow cot, hands entwined, hearts thunderous. Outside, aurora danced like curtains of ghostly flame. Inside, they whispered of gardens they would plant, children they might guide, songs yet unsung. Operation Breakfang commenced beneath slate sky swollen with snow. The allied host skirted Frostfang foothills, torches muted to slits of orange. Dragons glided overhead, wings beating hush like thunder heard from afar. Viserion, fully recovered, joined formation. Margaery rode behind lines, armored in fitted mail over green surcoat, marked with small obsidian rows sewn by Sansa's hand. Brienne kept near, vigilance unwavering. Approaching frozen lake, scouts signaled, enemy host camped upon far shore. Legions of whites arrayed like withered wheat, white walkers astride undead elk, and at center, a figure upon pale horse wearing crown of jagged ice. The Night King. He raised an arm. Sky darkened as if obeying. Snow gusted. Jon felt temperature plunge. Phase 1. Unsullied advanced onto lake's near edge. Shields braced. Free folk slingers darted along ridges, hurling pots of pitch that shattered across ice. Black puddles gleaming. Archers ignited arrowheads, firing to create barrier of flame behind allied line. Dragons circled, but withheld breath. Lures must bite. Night King spurred horse. White surged, clattering down slopes, ice cracking under mass. They spilled onto lake, feet scratching frosted surface. Unsullied withdrew gradually, drawing undead deeper. White cracks, spider-webbed across ice. Phase 2. Davos signaled. Dothraki Blood Riders, loaned by Daenerys despite their contempt for cold, charged along shoreline, flaming arcs painting arcs of orange. They sliced through flanks, herding whites toward central basin. The cracks widened, groaning like ancient wood. Now, Dragon's dove. Drogon vomited torrent of flame. Rhaegal roared emerald fire. Viserion exhaled gold-orange jet. Flames swept pitch patches, igniting into seething sheet. The central ice sagged. Water geysered as molten holes opened. Whites shrieked in unnatural chorus, limbs thrashing as they slid into frigid abyss. Steam plumed, hissing like a million serpents. But the Night King raised his hands. Frost rippled across water, snuffing flames in seconds, refreezing gaps. He dismounted, strode onto new ice. From behind him, 4 other walkers advanced. Spears ready. Jon saw, spurred his horse onto lake fringe. Ghost bounded ahead, hackles high. Margaery, from Command Ridge, watched breathless. Grey Worm rallied phalanx to form protective crescent around archers, adjusting to obsidian broadheads. Beguan, say. The Night King hurled spear of ice, whistle. Then Rhaegal screamed, wing pierced. Dragon spiraled, crashed onto shore, snow plume rising. Jon's heart lurched. Daenerys screamed in High Valyrian, Drogon banking enraged. She directed flame at Night King, but he walked through fire. Frost aura quenching edges. Jon knew only one path. Confront him. He dismounted, sprinted across ice slick with meltwater, Longclaw burning cold in grip. The Night King turned, eyes abyssal blue. Swords met. Longclaw parried Frost spear. Each impact birthed flurries. Jon's muscles burned, every breath razors. Behind, Whites clawed back across refreezing ice. Unsullied held line, but numbers pressed. Margaery saw Jon falter under crushing blow that cracked ice beneath feet. Without thought, she seized horse, galloped down slope. Brienne yelled protest, chased. Margaery slid to halt near lake edge, grabbed fallen spear tipped with obsidian. Brienne arrived just as Queen stepped onto treacherous surface. Margaery. Jon gasped as he parried blow that numbed arm. She hurled spear. It whistled, end over end, straight toward Night King's exposed flank. Yet he twisted, catching shaft mid-air. Smile ghosting icy lips. He snapped obsidian tip between gauntlet fingers, shards tinkling. But distraction enough. Jon surged, slashing downward. Valyrian edge bit through ice spear, cleaved deep into Night King's arm, severing below elbow. Crystal shards exploded. The creature reeled, inhuman roar fracturing air. Jon pressed advantage, but Walker Lieutenant interposed blade. Clash forced Jon back, knee buckling. Brienne barreled in, greatsword smashing Lieutenant's helm to powder, then carved downward, splitting torso. The walker shattered, Whites nearby collapsing. Ghost lunged at Night King, but Frost gust threw Direwolf aside, yelping. Night King retreated, clutching stump. He raised remaining hand skyward. Sky split, swirling vortex of snow, thunder, and blue lightning forming pillar around him. Jon sensed inevitable resurrection wave. Every corpse risked rising against them. Fall back. Jon shouted, voice ragged. Yet Margaery planted feet, seized broken obsidian shards at her boots. She flung handful into vortex. Shards pulsed with strange light, caught in whirlwind, scouring Night King's frozen flesh like sand on glass. He staggered, aura flickering. Dragons saw opening. Drogon swooped. Fire igniting vortex interior. Combining with obsidian dust. Explosion of azure flame erupted, engulfing Night King. Ice crown melted. Fissures spider-webbed across his torso. A shriek resonated through bones of living and dead alike. Then silence. The Night King cracked, splintered, collapsed into cascade of ice fragments. At once, Whites mid-charge halted, limbs slack. They toppled, unmoving. Cross frozen lake, thunderous slumps echoed. Army of dead undone. For breathless moment, the world hushed, but for hiss of cooling steam. Snowflakes drifted, Gentle now. Jon lowered sword, disbelief washing exhaustion. Cheers erupted from lines, free folk, ululations, unsullied war chant. Watch brothers banging shields. Drogon roared triumph that rolled across mountains. Jon turned to Margaery. She swayed, cheeks pale, obsidian dust streaking brow. He caught her as knees buckled. She blinked up, dazed smile. I always preferred gardening to war. She whispered, voice faint. You just uprooted death itself, he replied, tears mingling with sweat. Brienne knelt, embracing them both. Daenerys landed Drogon nearby, dismounted, eyes wide at field of fallen whites. She met Jon's gaze across carnage. Unspoken relief passed between Targaryen kin. Davos approached, beaming. Grey Worm reported casualties. Heavy but not devastating. Rhaegal wounded but airborne again. Edmure's barges would ferry injured south. That night, bonfires ringed lake. Flames dancing beneath aurora that returned vibrant emerald. Survivors shared ale and broth. Some weeping quietly, others singing ancient songs. Sam recorded events in leather-bound tome, quill trembling at magnitude. Jon and Margaery sat atop knoll overlooking celebrations. He wrapped fur around her shoulders. She leaned into warmth, head on his chest. The dead are defeated, she murmured. For now, he said. But living remain. We must heal. She lifted ringed hand, obsidian glinting. Then we live. We plant our garden, raise halls of learning, weave blankets for orphaned. We teach next generations peace. Jon kissed her hair. Wolf and Rose, rooted in Dragonfire, watered by storm, all realms shall flourish. Below, free folk danced with unsullied watchers once sworn enemy clapping rhythm. Shireen strummed carved lute, while giants rumbled bass harmony. Even Brienne laughed, helmet under arm. Stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to dawn newborn. In their glow, two figures held each other amid world made fragile by hope, yet strengthened by love. Snowmelt trickled, feeding hidden seeds. Somewhere in Winterfell's soil, a gardener's hand would soon press them into earth rich with promise. And across Westeros, ravens flew bearing myths transmuted into memory. How Dragonfire, obsidian and courage of a rose-crowned queen shattered winter's heart beside the steadfast wolf who chose unity over pride. Bards would argue details, scribes embellish, but truth lay simple. When night howled loudest, compassion struck truer than any blade. The pair watched first blush of dawn crest mountains, painting ice shards rosy gold. Margaery inhaled crisp air, eyes luminous. Our 5-hour tale may yet stretch to lifetimes, she said. Jon smiled, drawing her nearer. Then let's begin chapter next. And with that vow, they rose hand in hand to walk toward fires of fellowship, leaving footprints that winter could not erase. The first crocus appeared 2 days after the battle, a fragile purple spearhead pushing up through a crust of snow near Eastwatch's ruined stables. No one noticed at first. Then a leather-faced steward with a broom paused mid-sweep, knelt, and stared at the blossom as though it were a trick of weary eyes. Soon word spread along the ramparts. Life, bright and stubborn, had pierced winter's iron hide. When Margaery Tyrell heard, she left the infirmary on unsteady legs, walked to the stables, and crouched in the slush to press 2 trembling fingers to the bloom's silky petals, even with Dragonfire-seared winds cutting her cheeks raw. She laughed. A weary, hoarse sound that turned a dozen watchmen's heads and brought smiles to hard men who had not smiled since childhood. Jon found her there at dusk, the crocus already half buried again by drifting powder. She rose, wiping dirt on her skirts, and reached for his gloved hand. The lamp he carried threw honeyed light across the weirwood carving she wore at her throat. Snowflakes caught in his beard, in the dark waves of his hair. Neither spoke. Their silence brimmed with shared wonder and exhaustion, an acknowledgement that the world had tilted and not yet steadied. In the days that followed, they learned to move through a world abruptly cleansed of the endless skittering of whites. Eastwatch's defenders woke each morning expecting distant shrieks or the clack of frost-bitten limbs on ice. But there was only the hush of wind and the rasp of saws as free folk felled dead pines for palisades. At night, fires burned without fear of drawing an undead horde. Storytellers spun new verses beside those flames, children of every tongue sleeping in clusters against shaggy direwolf pelts, passed down by Jon's men. Daenerys stayed 5 days, tending Rhaegal's bandaged wing and speaking soft syllables in the great beast's ear. Then she climbed upon Drogon's neck and rose above the wall on a clear morning, taking Viserion as escort. The dragon's shadows flitted across snow-white cliffs like omens of hope, and her promise echoed in Jon's ears long after she vanished. "The South is not yet safe, my cousin. We will meet again at King's Landing, or at Winterfell's gardens." He watched until the specks winked out above the horizon before descending to the council chamber, carved from Eastwatch's oldest tower. There, parchment maps sprawled beneath stones to keep them from curling in damp. Inked symbols had shifted. The jagged spiral of the Night King now bore a red slash through its heart. New threats, the lion, the kraken, the sellsword serpent, crowded the coasts and roads south of the Gift. Shireen Baratheon traced supply routes from Storm's End to Gulltown, lips pursed. Edmure Tully added copper markers for rising Riverlander levies. Grey Worm stood with arms crossed, silent as granite, while Tormund Giantsbane gnawed on a smoked mammoth rib and complained, "Maps taste worse than snow if you stare at 'em too long." Margaery slipped into the room and all conversation paused. She wore a fitted riding jacket of thick green wool quilted with silver roses. Beneath, her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, revealing scratches knitted with new pink skin. She rested one palm on the table edge. "Winterfell sends ravens," she said. "Lady Sansa writes that rebuilding moves swiftly, but grain stocks run low. Spring seeds must be sown within the month." Jon met her gaze. He had seen her break spears of ice with obsidian shards and pull charred children from fire. Yet somehow the matter of seeds carried equal gravity. "We'll escort the caravans ourselves. Half our host will march to Winterfell, guard the Gift villages, then ride south through the Neck." "No." Shireen shook her head. "Your banner's still needed on Trident." The lion circles Harrenhal again, teeth bared. Edmure bristled. "Let him. Tully bowmen know the marshes better than Lannisters know their vaults." "And Tyrell coffers cover your arrows?" Margaery reminded gently. "But we cannot fund what we cannot see. We need oversight." Jon spread his fingers on the map, felt the grit of spilled sand. "Then we split. I lead a third of the force. Starks, free folk volunteers, to Winterfell. Margaery and Brienne ride with me, oversee grain. Shireen marches south with Edmure and Grey Worm to hold the crossings and harass the Golden Company. Davos sails to White Harbor, secures naval supplies and petitions Lord Manderley to release every last merchant galley." The old smuggler tipped 2 fingers to his brow. "I'll have mackerel in King's Landing by midsummer, or I'll eat my other hand." Tormund belched. "And I'll drink the mackerel's guts if it gets us south of these ice walls." They put quills to vellum until candles guttered and new watch shifts creaked down the corridor. At last Margaery closed her inkpot and touched Jon's sleeve. "Come," she whispered. "Even kings need rest." They climbed narrow stairs to their chamber high under the eaves, where the wind moaned like a distant organ and frost feathered the arrow slit. There were no featherbeds in Eastwatch, only a straw pallet layered with furs and 2 lanterns hung from hooks. Margaery undid the ties of her jacket, fingers shaking, and Jon brushed them aside to finish the task, pressing lips to the bruises left by armor straps. She sighed. "Does your shoulder still ache?" she asked. "It will mend." He unfastened his surcoat, shrugged it over a chair. "But there's a deeper ache I don't know how to name." She cupped his face, thumbs tracing the faint scar near his left eye. A memento of ice claws years old. "The world changed in one night, love. Bones shift after such force. We'll learn new balance." He lowered his forehead to hers. "If balance means you at my side, I'll learn." Later, when their breaths slowed, She lay with head on his chest and listened to the distant thud of waves against cliffs. "Tell me a dream," she murmured. He thought of the crocus. "I dream of small things, carpenter hammers in Winterfell's great hall, laughter in the glass gardens. I dream of a girl riding a direwolf pup through blooming rows of roses and snowdrops." He hesitated. "Your laughter guides her." She smiled against his skin. Tears pricked her eyes. "And I dream of you at twilight, telling our son the tale of how the dead marched and were broken, not by swords alone, but by courage shared." Sleep came like a mercy. When dawn cracked pale across the sky, the camp stirred to horns summoning companies to formation. Steel laces tightened. Horses stamped. Margaery and Jon broke fast with hard bread dunked in onion broth, then descended to the yard. He in black leather and wolf pelt, she in riding greens, sword belted despite Brienne's constant fretting. Ghost padded behind, a white shadow among men. The column set out southward at sunup. 400 Northmen, 200 free folk. A handful of giants carrying wagon frames on shoulders like toy branches, 3 slow-rolling carts of Wintertown carpenters, and 20 healers. Jon rode at the head with Tormund one side, Margaery the other. Brienne and 20 Riverlord outriders scouted ahead. In the rear plodded pack ponies laden with seed corn, sealed in waxed leather. Banner poles sprouted along the line, direwolf snarling beside rows, blackfish leaping, green stag rampant. Snowflakes wheeled above, but spring tugged at the land. Rivulets trickled beneath the crust. Bough tips glowed red with promise. Crossing the shivering wood, they found empty cots abandoned by wildlings who'd fled east when the dead rose. Margaery left parcels of dried fruit and barley inside, pinned with parchment reading for returning friends, Rose and Wolf. Tormund laughed until tears froze in his beard. "If they find that, milady, you'll have guests pounding at Winterfell's gate before long. That's the plan." "Tyrell," she replied. "No kingdom prospers by empty houses." At the banks of the Milkwater they camped, building fires from driftwood that snapped salt sparks skyward. Jon walked perimeter after dusk, stopping to speak with each watch pair, checking bowstrings. Returning to the main ring of tents, he heard music. A bone flute weaving a lilting tune. He found Margaery seated on a log while a free folk youth, Ravna, daughter of Thens, played. Snow caught in Ravna's dark braids. Her eyes shone lidless. Other soldiers circled, some clapping quietly, others humming words half-remembered. Jon sank beside Margaery. "What's the song?" "A lullaby about reindeer and the spirits of dawn," she said. "Ravna offered to teach me." She patted her lap. Ravna passed the flute, and Margaery coaxed tentative notes. They faltered then steadied. The circle brightened as more voices joined. A Stormlander sailor hummed low, a Night's Watch builder thumped rhythmic palms on a kettle helm. Frost melted on their cheeks. Jon tilted his head, studying the faces wrapped around the fire. "If white ravens fly tomorrow, they'll carry tales of unlikely chords." Margaery lowered the flute. "The realm must learn new harmonies." He grinned. "Then play, my queen." She did. Music rose, layers braiding like rivers converging. Ghost howled softly at the edge, a counter-melody older than men. The stars themselves seemed to shift in time. By the 4th week, they reached the villages of the Gift. There they found fields lying fallow, huts patched with pine branches, and children with hollow cheeks. The grain wagons rolled into central yards, and the smell of fresh-baked bread rose within hours. Jon ordered 1/10 of all copper coin in the army's coffers distributed to widows. Margaery directed carpenters to repair roofs before they raised their own tents. Free folk hunters taught northern boys to snare ptarmigan. In return, Northmen showed free folk how to shear sheep without killing them. Brienne organized foot races for the adolescents. She served as referee and occasionally outraced them all, earning guffaws. In the evenings, Margaery organized readings. She had carried from Eastwatch a leather satchel filled with half-burned tomes, saved from the dead village libraries, stories of Nymeeria's voyage, fables of the children of the forest, treatises on crop rotation. She read by torchlight, while farmers drank weak ale and sharpened hoes. Some nights Jon read while she braided a girl's hair. His rough voice surprised everyone, including him, with gentleness. The nights warmed, but letters from the south grew cold. Raven after raven told of Lannister countermoves. Cersei had sealed King's Landing, imported fresh sellswords from Volantis, and claimed Daenerys dragon tyranny threatened smallfolk. Stormlander scouts reported trebuchets being built on the Blackwater Rush, each labeled Bane of Dragons. Davos scrolls spoke of bribes needed to keep Manderley's captains loyal, and Edmure's missives bore darker ink. Rumors that Qyburn had purchased wildfire from hidden caches beneath the city. Jon convened council under a budding apple tree outside Last Hearth. The breeze carried pollen and smoke of mutton. On benches scraped by frost, they unfurled maps again. Cersei fortifies, waiting for us to exhaust coin and patience. Edmure's latest letter read, "Your swift victory in the north unsettles kingdoms. Yet smallfolk whisper that dragons will burn them all, no matter the queen atop them. We must prove otherwise, or her lies take root." Margaery traced the roads from River Run to King's Landing. "We need a spectacle of mercy." Food wagons under Tyrell banner riding directly to each river hamlet ravaged by Lannisters. And safety along Gold Road, else fear rules. "They," Tormund snorted. "Mercy looks like weakness to lions. They'll pounce." "Not if the wagons are flanked by giants," Margaery replied, and turned her bright smile upon Wunwun's brethren seated at edge of camp. The giants grinned, baring teeth like broken tombstones. One rumbled approval. Jon nodded. "Do it. Let the world see the Alliance feed mouths, not just sharpen blades." He folded the letter. "But this ends only when Cersei yields the throne or falls." Brienne set gauntlets on the map. "Our strength is hearts won. We cannot win a Red Keep siege through slaughter alone." "Ben?" "Agreed," Jon said. "We need infiltration. Someone who knows those tunnels as I know the wall staircases." All eyes drifted to Davos, who was turning a dagger idly. He looked up, sighed. "Smuggler's work again, is it?" "7 help me." 7 days later, the column reached Winterfell. The castle's towers rose beyond scaffolds and new-hewn timber frameworks. Windows glowed, banners waved, and at the gatehouse stood Sansa, Arya, and Maester Wolkan. Sansa wore a pale blue gown and silver pelts. Arya leaned on Dark Sister's scabbard, smile sly. They greeted Jon with tight embraces. Sansa's voice trembled. "You kept your promise and returned." She stepped back to study Margaery with open affection. "And you kept him whole." Margaery laughed. "Mostly. The rest I'll mend with soup and sleep." Inside, warmth roared from every hearth. Laughter ricocheted off stones that once echoed only ghosts' sighs. In the great hall, long tables sagged with trenchers of venison, oatcakes, carrots candied in honey. Northmen and free folk sat shoulder to shoulder. Giants stooped to fit beneath rafters, sipping cider from casks. The aroma of Tyrell herbs twined with juniper smoked over fire pits. That night, beneath vaulted timbers, Jon announced the founding of the Order of the Dawn, a council of lords and commoners alike, sworn to guard peace after the long night's end. A hush fell. He invited Lady Lyanna Mormont to speak. The girl rose on the bench and declared that Bear Island would stand sentinel against any tyrant, iron-crowned or dragon-winged, to raucous applause. Next, Shireen proposed scholarships for orphaned war children, funded by Baratheon estates. Margaery outlined her garden project, converting Winterfell's outer bailey to a glasshouse warmed by the hot springs, where roses would mingle with weirwood saplings to symbolize unity. The vote passed by a unanimous shout. Sansa smiled so widely tears spilled. Arya smirked, nudged Jon. "Look at you, from snow-covered bastard to Gardener King." He ruffled her hair, earning an eye roll. During the revel, he found Margaery leaning on balcony overlooking the yard. Snowdust twirled around the lanterns. Music drifted. Drummers hammered wildling skins. Pipers played reach ballads. Jon came to her side, offered a cup of blackberry wine. "Ready for rest?" he asked. "Soon." She gazed at the half-built glasshouse frame, latticed iron glinting starlight. "We have dragons to face, a lion to dethrone. Yet tonight I feel..." She turned, placed palm on his chest, like holding breath before new leaf unfurls. He set the cup down, drew her close. "Whatever storms come, we'll breathe together." She kissed him beneath whirling flakes. In that moment, Winterfell felt neither north nor reach, but some new realm born of both. By sunrise, ravens took wing. Messages to Highgarden requesting seeds, to River Run requesting masons, to Dragonstone requesting obsidian saplings. Daenerys sent back a puzzled but amused reply. Another raven carried Jon's invitation to parley in the Field of Roses, halfway between King's Landing and Bitterbridge, a neutral meadow rumored to bloom first every spring. "Let us settle peace among flowers, not ash," the letter read. It bore the seal of direwolf intertwined with rose. Cersei's answer arrived 6 days later on parchment smelling faintly of myrrh. It contained one sentence: "Flowers wilt beneath wildfire." Beneath, a crimson lion rampant, stamped in wax. Sansa read it aloud in council chamber. Silence followed. Margaery broke it. "Then we must bring water," she said. They prepared. Shireen's engineers fitted barrels of river water to wagons drawn by oxen. Giants hauled limestone to line trenches outside city walls. Jon drilled new regiments of torchbearers, each trained to douse flames as quickly as light them. Davos returned from White Harbor with a sleek black schooner laden with ropes, hooks, and naphtha-sealed clay bombs, which he swore never to use unless desperate. Brienne oversaw forging of broad shields coated in fire-resistant paste, brewed from ground dragon glass and pig fat. And far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen circled Dragonstone's basalt towers deep in thought. She penned a scroll in High Valyrian, sealed with three-headed dragon, and sent it north with her swiftest raven. It arrived on a rainy afternoon while Jon and Margaery sparred in Winterfell's yard. Wet feathers, frantic tapping. They gathered beneath the covered walkway, broke seal, and read. "My kin and friend," it began. "The lion's pride blinds her to mercy. Yet I too have known the lure of fury. My people counsel fire and blood, but your victories whisper another path. If there is yet a chance to end this without raising King's Landing, I will stand with you. Name the hour." Drogon waits above storm. Margaery looked up. The hour is spring's first full moon. The air smells of thaw and hope. Jon nodded. "Then we ride south one last time." They left Winterfell amid cheering crowds, blossoms of snowdrop and crocus nodding between flagstones. Sansa embraced them at the gate. Arya clasped both their hands and, with a mischievous grin, promised to scout ahead in her own way. Brienne led vanguard cavalry. Davos guided supply fleet along coast. Shireen drove fiery resistant wagons. Giants trudged behind like walking hills. Overhead, ravens scouted. Somewhere beyond clouds, a dragon's silhouette traced circles. The march grew swifter once past Moat Cailin, banners snapping with southern breeze. Villagers lined roads to gift goat cheese and woven flower crowns. Children shouted. Snow Rose, a name that stuck. Near the Trident they rendezvoused with Edmure. River lords, Baratheon stag, Tyrell levies, and Dorne's sand-skinned cavalry, riding under crimson sun. Beneath a pavilion striped green and gray, lords clasped arms. The host now numbered 30,000 foot. "6,000 horse. "3 days' march, and the walls of King's Landing appeared. gilded in evening light. Plumes of smoke curled over spired rooftops. Jon ordered camps pitched just beyond Scorpion bolt range. Tyrell engineers erected water towers. Stark builders dug trenches. Dothraki patrolled perimeters. Singing low, Cersei sent no envoy. Instead, wildfire jars were catapulted beyond the gate that night. Green flames searing trenches, but failing to breach wet limestone lining. The giants stomped them out with slave roof tiles strapped to their feet. At dawn, Jon rode into the field of roses with Davos, Margaery, Brienne, and Arya, who had indeed scouted ahead, now disguised as a reach page. The meadow lay golden, petals dewy. Tyrion Lannister awaited, clad not in Lannister crimson but plain wool. He bowed. "My sister denies parley. I come on my own." He gestured to a wagon behind, piled with barrels. Wildfire hidden beneath the sept before she demolished it. She plans to burn the city rather than yield. "Help me stop her." Jon dismounted, eyes narrowing. Why betray her? Tyrion sighed, thumbed a tarnished pin that once held his hand's mantle. "Because a queen who burns kingdoms to ash is no queen, and my brother's ghost hounds my dreams." He faced Margaery. "And because I owe you a husband and children and gardens I helped destroy." Margaery's throat caught. She inclined her head. "Then let us repay debt with mercy." That night, Davos smuggled Tyrion and Arya through the mud gate in the Black Schooner. They infiltrated Red Keep's undercellars, disabling wildfire casks with water pumped from harbor. On the battlements, Arya confronted Euron Greyjoy, now Cersei's Lord High Admiral, slitting his throat in single silent stroke and hurling his body into the Blackwater. Bells of the harbor district rang with news rumor of Kraken's death. At sunrise, Daenerys circled above the city. Drogon's roar a warning. Jon rode to the Iron Gate with giant One Mora at his side. Banners of wolf and rose carried behind. He called for surrender. The gates remained shut. Then a small figure appeared atop crenellations. Jaime Lannister, cloak white no more but gray as ash. His golden hand lifted. He shouted that the queen refused. Yet his voice wavered. As he turned, Arya emerged behind, blade at his throat. A ruse to gain vantage. She vanished again down a stairwell. Jaime, shaken, returned to Cersei's chambers bearing tidings of wildfire sabotage. Rage fractured the Lion Queen at last. Witnesses later reported her screams, echoing like rending metal. By noon, smoke rose from Maegor's holdfast. Not wildfire, but torches hurled by Cersei's own guards, bribed by Tyrion and weary of senseless slaughter. Lannister banners fell. Gold cloaks threw down spears. Cersei fled toward the crypts beneath the keep, wildfire torch in hand, only to find Tyrion waiting. He spoke softly. Of children lost, of houses built on broken bones. She laughed, struck him across the mouth, and raised torch. Arya's dagger pinned her hand to the stone arch. Wildfire spilled harmlessly on flagstones damp from earlier sabotage. Jaime stepped from shadows, removed her crown, and laid it at her feet. She crumpled, weeping not from pain but from ruin of pride. The city opened its gates. Jon and Daenerys rode side by side through streets once lined with crucified children, now lined with silent, wide-eyed crowds. Margaery followed, Brienne guarding her flank. No cheers, only wary breaths. When they reached the steps of the destroyed sept, Jon dismounted and summoned giants to haul shattered marble away. He climbed the rubble and addressed the city. "No king here, no queen, only the living. We come not to rule by fire, but to rebuild by soil and stone." Daenerys repeated the promise in Valyrian, then signaled dragons to circle, but not breathe. Their wings thundered, but no flames leapt. Children pointed skyward, wonder outshining fear. Surrender terms were swift. Cersei to stand trial before a council of the realm's lords and smallfolk jurors. Jaime accepted custody under Brienne's guard. The Golden Company laid down swords in exchange for passage home. Lannister soldiers offered pardon if they rebuilt the houses they'd razed. Wildfire stores were dredged from tunnels and doused. Tyrion oversaw each barrel destroyed, tears coursing soot-streaked cheeks. 3 days later, in the dragon pit restored by Dothraki carpenters, Jon and Daenerys convened the first great council since Aegon's conquest. Lords of every surviving house attended, and for the first time, smallfolk representatives sat beside them. A baker from Fleabottom, a shepherd from Red Mountains, a free folk spearwife, a sailor from the Arbor. They debated until voices cracked. Monarchic succession, rights of orphan children, limitation of wildfire. When at last the vote came, they chose to enthrone a council of 6 regents. One from each region, who would elect a guardian every 10 years. Jon declined nomination, pointing to Margaery. Margaery declined in turn, naming Sansa. Sansa accepted as Northern Regent, her calm voice stilling argument. Daenerys accepted seat for Crownlands, swearing dragons henceforth tools only of defense against unnatural threats. Tyrion represented the Reach until a Tyrell heir old enough to speak chose for themselves. Shireen Baratheon, Stormlands, Edmure Tully, Rivers, Alleria Sand's daughter Sarella, Dorne, Tormund Giantsbane, free folk observer without vote but with roar. After council, under violet dusk, gardens of King's Landing were tilled anew by prisoners and free citizens side by side. Margaery knelt to plant the first rose, cutting beside a newborn sapling of heart, tree gifted by the children of the forest. If whispers true, they appeared one night, left it, vanished. Jon placed soil over the roots. Around them the city bustled with cautious hope. Months passed. Spring swelled into early summer. On the anniversary of the Battle of the Frozen Lake, Winterfell's glasshouse thrummed with color. Blue winter roses climbing trellises, rich thornless varieties wrapping pillars, pale ghost lilies from the wall blooming in steamy corners. Margaery walked paths barefoot, skirts hitched, humming Northman lullabies off-key. Jon entered, a toddler on his hip, brown curls, gray eyes, Edric Snow Tyrell, though Sansa insisted he be styled Edric Stark in half the letters. The boy reached for pink petals. Jon obliged. "Gentle," he coached. The child giggled, clutching one petal, then planted sloppy kiss on his father's whiskered jaw. Margaery laughed. Hell charmed the realm with that grin. Jon set Edric on grass. The boy tottered toward Ghost, stretched in afternoon sun. The direwolf yawned, allowed tiny hands to tug fur. "Council meets in 4 days," Jon said, watching Sun and Wolf. "Daenerys expects you to present report on agricultural reform." Margaery plucked dirt from nails. "I'll bring a bushel of apples instead. Let them taste results." She joined him at bench carved of petrified weirwood, rested head on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss the sword?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But forging plowshares gives different satisfaction. And Edric yields harder blows than any training dummy." She squeezed his hand, felt calluses softened by seasons of hoeing. "Do you think the peace will hold?" He watched sunlight filter through glass, painting roses indigo. "As long as we weed the garden, prune when needed, and never forget the crocus that rose through ice." A horn call echoed beyond the courtyard. Sansa returning from Moat Cailin with caravan of spices and scrolls. Margaery rose, brushed skirt, and called for servants to prepare tea. Jon hoisted Edric, who squealed delight and tossed petal confetti. Outside, faint snowflakes swirled. A last playful kiss from winter, but melted on warm stone. Spring answered with birdsong. Years unborn would know this age by many names. Era of the dawning council, season of the wolf and rose, peace of the broken spear. Bards would argue the true hero. Dragon queen, gardener queen, king who refused crown, smuggler with silver tongue, girl with many faces. Yet all their tales began at crossroads of frost and bloom, where 2 hearts chose unity over ruin. In the quiet between legends, Jon carried his son along the glasshouse rows, while Margaery recited each flower's tale, some from Reach manuscripts, others invented on the spot. Laughter mingled with rustling leaves. And high overhead, through panes warmed by hidden springs, drifting petals joined snow in dance eternal, neither overpowering the other, but together sketching patterns of fragile, fierce beauty across the sky. Ah, hi, ah. A warm breeze drifted over Winterfell's battlements, carrying the scent of damp earth and new-turned flower beds. In the glasshouse, the roses had reached the vaulted ceiling, their thornless canes branching in graceful chandeliers of pink and wine-dark bloom. Dragon glass heating pipes hissed beneath slate tiles, disgorging vapor that beaded on the petals like dew even at midday. Bees descended from a Tyrell hive once transplanted in a wicker chest, traced lazy spirals through the air, indifferent to the sentries pacing their routes just beyond the crystal panes. Jon Snow stood inside the doorway, arms folded. The glashhouse's fragrant warmth clung to his hair and dark leathers, but the serenity failed to soften the knot of unease in his stomach. It had been 6 years since the Night King shattered on a frozen lake. 4 years since the Lion Queen surrendered her crown under the Dragon Pit's fractured dome. In that short sweep of seasons, Westeros had known peace such as balladeers had not sung of since the Age of Heroes. But Jon felt it. A hairline crack beneath the painted calm, a tremor waiting to become a quake. He edged around a cart stacked with seedling trays. Ahead, Margaery knelt beside a stone basin where lily fronds stirred in warm water. Their son Edric, now 7, lean as an arrow with a shock of unruly snow-black hair, knelt opposite her, his brow furrowed in concentration, while he coaxed a shy goldfish toward a cluster of breadcrumbs floating on the surface. Jon cleared his throat. Margaery glanced up, gold-flecked hazel eyes searching his. One look told her enough. She rose fluidly, dusted damp soil from her gloves, and pressed a quick kiss to Edric's head. "Practice your Valyrian names for the lilies," she reminded softly. "We'll want you to recite them for Daenerys this evening." Edric brightened. He touched a petal and whispered, "Q lo." Then, in the common tongue, "See. Star." Margaery flashed him a proud smile before crossing the path to Jon. She slipped her hand into his, and they stepped out of earshot, behind a curtain of white climbing roses. A bee bumbled between them, then veered away. "What news?" she asked. 3 riders reached the Dreadfort by nightfall," Jon murmured. "The Bolton loyalists we pardoned are sheltering them. Bran's ravens show unfamiliar banners, a red wyvern coiled around a broken sword." "Essos," she guessed. "Braavos, I think," he answered. Tyrion's last letter warned of sellsword companies hiring north across the narrow sea. Some talk of debts unpaid by the crown, even though the council settled every ledger 2 winters ago. Margaery's lips compressed. "A debt is a blade." Honed on rumor if not on gold. She peered through the roses at Edric's intent form. "And we have children who believe the world gentle." Jon exhaled. "Gentle or complacent?" She shook her head. "Hopeful." He touched her cheek, tracing a faint new line of sun freckle. "We'll keep it hopeful." That afternoon they convened the Northern Assembly in Winterfell's renovated Great Hall. Gone were the dust-choked rafters and smoke-grimed banners. Light poured through newly glazed windows, splashing over polished oak benches where lords and common folk sat shoulder to shoulder. At the dais, Sansa Stark, regent of the North and guardian of the realm for the current term, welcomed the throng with poised calm that belied the tension crackling beneath each exchange of glances. Jon and Margaery entered together. Murmurs rippled across the chamber. They took their seats among the council, flanked by Shireen Baratheon. Taller now, scars pale against her throat, and a slow-eyed Dornish woman, wearing the sun and spear brooch of her mother. Sorella Sam. Tyrion shuffled parchment, quill lodged behind his ear. Sansa lifted her voice. "A petition stands before us. Lord Gower of the Broken Arm claims pirates under a wyvern flag raid the stepstones and traffic salt wives into the Reach." She paused. "A second report places that same banner in the longships prowling the shivering sea. We seek counsel." All heads swung. Margaery rose smoothly. "My lords and ladies, Wheat caravans from Horn Hill to Old Town speckle the roads like breadcrumbs for crows. We face famine if raids continue. I propose we open the garden treasury and charter a protective fleet. Riverlanders know river war, and Manderley captains crave adventure. She smiled at Lord Wyman's stout grandson across the aisle. A modest tariff on autumn wine can repay the loans within 2 years. Murmurs of approval bloomed. Yet a grizzled Northman, Lord Norrie, breath smelling of cloves, stood. Gold buys ships, but gold does not man them, he said. Our sons grow restless with peace's soft belly. Send volunteers south. They return hardened, not hungry. Tormund Giantsbane, lounging nearby, let out a booming laugh. A fight? Count us in. Free folk will sail, though we like fighting on things that don't sink. Even Tyrion chuckled. Sansa nodded. Let it be recorded. A mixed fleet, funded by Reach coin and crewed by volunteers north and south. Command. Eyes turned to Jon. He remained seated, voice steady. The seas answer best to Davos Seaworth. If the council approves, we summon him from White Harbor. Nenarau. The vote passed with raised hands. Sansa struck the gavel thrice on the table. So ordered. But as the assembly filed out, a messenger hurried in. Road dust caked on boots. He knelt before Sansa, produced a sealed pouch. She read the parchment, face blanched. Without a word, she beckoned Jon, Margaery, Tyrion, and Shireen into the solar behind the dais. Inside, Sansa laid the parchment on a circular oak table. This came from Old Town by Raven to Deepwood Motte, then overland. The Citadel confirms. A pox unknown in living memory spreads along the arbor's southern vineyards. Fever and black lesions. Tally of dead rises daily. None. Shireen ran fingertips over the ink. Black spots. Could it be relapsing grayscale mutation? Tyrion rubbed his scarred chin. If a plague grips the arbor, sailors fleeing those docks could carry it anywhere, including our new fleet. Margaery inhaled sharply. Half the realm's wine comes from the arbor. Casks move on every cart. We must quarantine before harvest shipments reach port. Jon's brow tightened. We risk revolt if we cut off wine to every tavern just as we draft sailors. Can we control without panic? Sansa's voice lowered. We have to try. That night, Jon and Margaery met on Winterfell's highest gatehouse, lanterns flickering around them. Wind smelled of thaw, yet he felt winter's teeth in the news. Margaery rested her arms on the stone parapet. Below, moonlight silvered the rooftops of Wintertown. Laughter drifted upward from inns, oblivious. Disease, pirates, debts. She murmured. Peace is a garden full of seedlings. Weed roots spread unseen until sunset casts them tall. He placed a hand over hers. We have good soil still. She turned, pressing her forehead to his chest. Promise me we'll not tear the garden down to save it. I've seen kingdoms burn their own fields out of fear. He wrapped her in his cloak. I promise. He lifted her chin, searching her eyes. And I need your promise. If plague strikes, you'll guard yourself. No midnight tending to infected children without mask and salve. She attempted a teasing smile but faltered. A queen's vows bind both ways, Wolfking. Wind moaned between crenellations like distant horns. Far above, sheets of pale green aurora rippled. A haunting echo of the night the dead fell. Jon remembered the bitter tang of fear, the metallic taste of resolve. He brushed knuckles down Margaery's arm. We'll meet this storm as we met the last, with open eyes and joined hands. Within a fortnight, Winterfell's south gate disgorged wagons laden with linen bales, barrels of vinegar, bundles of sage and onions said to ward sickness. Maesters from the Citadel, led by Samwell Tarly cloaked in grey wool, established quarantine tents outside the walls. Grey Worm arrived with a detachment of unsullied medics versed in the salves of Ennieth. They built fire pits for burning contaminated straw and set strict routes for wagons entering from the south. Margaery donned a mask stitched from fine cotton and lavender sprigs and joined Samwell in the triage tents. The first patients from the arbor arrived on a lumber ship, rerouted to White Harbor. Feverish deckhands with swollen tongues and patches of dead flesh on their arms. Sam shaved heads, applied poultices of pine tar and crushed garlic. Margaery held trembling hands and whispered stories of gardens where moonlight never faded. Many survived, though not all. Jon patrolled the quarantine cordon each dawn, greeting each guard by name. He visited sick tents only in cedar smoke fumigation hours, but every time he left, he carried the echo of their coughing into his dreams. One morning, Sam entered the council chamber, eyes rimmed red. He set a tin jar of blackened blood on the table. "This came from one of the dead," he said. "Under crystal lens, there are shapes, like tiny crowned spheres. I believe the plague spreads by breath." Tyrion paled. Shireen frowned. "Masks and distance then," she said. "And close the taverns." Sansa winced. Closing taverns in seed-sowing season would starve Wintertown's economy. But Jon nodded. "Issue the order." He fixed Sam with steady gaze. "Find a cure." Sam dipped his head. "I will." The next blow came 3 nights later. A raven from Moat Cailin pierced the stormy dark. Davos Seaworth's fleet had met the pirate wyverns near the stepstones and routed them, but at cost. 3 Northmen longships burned. Davos himself bore arrow wounds. He wrote that the enemy fought not like seaborne raiders but disciplined infantry, sellswords from the free cities, flying the symbol of a broken sword dipped in crimson. "Someone richer than plunder pays them," the letter ended. "Find who?" Jon paced before the hearth after reading. Sparks snapped behind the grate. Ghost raised his head from the bearskin rug. Margaery watched from the settle, fingers entwined. "Bravos?" she offered. "Iron Bank always hedges its bets." "Possibly," he said. "But sellswords once sailed to the freezing north for coin alone. They need promise of plunder equal to risk." He lifted his gaze to her. She understood immediately. The Dragon Forge. In the hills west of Carhold, dragonglass forges smelted black obsidian into arrowheads, spear points, surgical blades. Their furnaces were lined with legend. This was the site of Valyrian sorcerer's lost workshop, rediscovered by Bran's visions. The forge's output had become the realm's most coveted resource. The weapon that felled the dead now shaped the living world's new economy. To capture those forges would mean unrivaled power. Margaery stood. "We must send a garrison." Jon shook his head. "They aren't after mere glass. They want the schematics." Bran's scrolls describe forging glass steel alloys. If a sellsword company steals them, any foreign power could mass-produce blades that render dragons helpless. "Then Bran must hide the scrolls," she said. Jon's mouth flattened. "He's already left Winterfell for the forge. He wants to oversee the next alloy test." She closed the distance, placing one hand on his chest. "Then we ride tonight." The moon carved a ghostly path over snow-tipped pines as Jon, Margaery, Brienne, and a retinue of 50 mounted guards thundered eastward. Edric remained with Sansa. The boy had cried but accepted his wooden direwolf, clutching it like a real cub. Before leaving, Jon knelt and promised to return before the wolf pup's tail wore smooth. Edric believed him absolutely. Jon prayed the gods would too. Snow squalls lashed their cloaks as they crested the ridge above the Forge Valley. Below, 5 pyramidal kilns spat crimson sparks into night. Iron rails wound through the complex, carting obsidian ingots toward quenching pools, watched by blacksmiths in slate-gray uniforms. Watching, Jon marveled again. The North had built this in 4 years, melding Tyrell architecture with dwarf smith crank wheels. But his wonder curdled when he spotted figures at the far gate. Too many shapes, some armored in unfamiliar patterns. Brienne dismounted beside a frost-rimmed spruce. Sentries. See their helmets? Concave cheek guards. Not northern. Jon's throat tightened. Sell's words. Margaery raised a spyglass. Red Wyvern banner, there. She lowered it. They're inside the perimeter. And Bran with them, Jon muttered. Look. From the main kiln's stone steps, small group emerged. Bran, cloak swirling, iron rune staff in hand. Beside him a tall man in scale armor gestured with broad sweeps, commanding, not pleading. At Bran's shoulders shadowed 2 forged steel seekers, the clockwork ravens crafted for him by Qyburn's repentant apprentices. Their gears whirred in agitation. Jon tasted copper rage. They're forcing him. Brienne signaled the guards. They fanned through trees. Margaery seized Jon's arm. Wait. Bran might parley to buy time. Jon swallowed. We advanced quietly until his signal. But a horn blast shattered the hush. Sellsword lookouts had spied the rider's breath pluming in the tree line. Arrows whistled. One guard cried out and tumbled from saddle. Jon cursed. Brienne drew her sword. Margaery snatched his reins. Go, she urged. I'll ride the flank with archers. Rescue Bran. Protect the schematics. She tried to sound bold, but fear trembled beneath. Jon pressed his brow to hers. Come back to me. Then he spurred his mare downslope, Ghost bounding ahead like pale lightning. Sellswords formed a shield wall near the kilns. Their commander, a towering figure with gold-plated pauldrons, shouted orders in Bravasi. Jon crashed into them with half his guard, Longclaw flashing, Ghost leaping for throats. Steel rang on reforged snowbreaker shields. Sparks sprayed in crimson arcs. Brienne cleaved through a rank, her oathblade shrieking. Behind, Margaery directed volley after volley from bowmen perched on slag heaps, each arrow whispering past Jon's ear into gaps of scale. Bran stood at Kiln's dais, eyes white, ravens aloft. Jon glimpsed him sway. Then a new cry split the night. Dragons? No. Wind over forge chimneys howling like ancient beasts. Bran's eyes cleared. He slammed his staff on stone. Obsidian shards embedded in its crown flared blue. In the brazier pits, molten glass surged, twisting upward in ropes that cooled to onyx mid-air, forming jagged brambles around the kilns. The Sellswords faltered. Many shrank back. Their commander pressed forward, brandishing curved sword with sapphire stud pommel. Jon met him. The man's strength hammered through shield and guards both. Jon felt his elbow jar, but Brienne flanked, driving him into Jon's riposte. Longclaw pierced mail. The commander gasped. The sapphire pommel rolled from slack fingers, clinking on stone. He collapsed, blood dark on snow. At that, the sellsword line broke. Some fled into pines where Margaery's archers hemmed them. Others dropped weapons. The clash ended as abruptly as it began. Jon mounted the steps 2 at a time, caught Bran as his brother's knees buckled. Bran's lips were pale, eyes glassy. Schematics, he whispered. They bound me to unlock the vault. I twisted the wards instead. Margaery rushed up, trailing the sweet pungency of spent arrow feathers. You're hurt. Drained only, Bran murmured. The forge answered me too eagerly. Jon laid him on a padded bench. Brienne fetched water. The guards lit torches to search remaining halls. One returned with a satchel of vellum rolls. The schematics, found undisturbed behind a secret panel Bran had shifted using his power. As dawn bled silver across the peaks, Margaery walked the kiln platform, surveying the obsidian thicket Bran had woven. Shards steamed, radiating residual power. She touched one. It sang faintly, recalling the music of glasswind swirling at Hardhome. Jon ascended behind her. He did this to protect us, she said, voice hushed. Jon nodded. The forge may not yield to men again. The metal listens only to Bran now. Perhaps that is for the best, she answered. A weapon, free to all, is a weapon for chaos. He watched smoke curl into graying sky. The Sellswords sought more than gold. They sought to tip the realm back into war. Then no. And someone in the realm hired them. They rode back to Winterfell with Bran swaddled in fur, and the stolen satchel sealed in a lead-lined chest. At the gates, Edric raced across the yard, trailed by Ghost, whose muzzle still bore flecks of dried blood. Jon dismounted, swept the boy up. Edric laughed until he spied the gash on his father's forearm. You're bleeding, he whispered. A scratch, Jon said lightly. But Edric pressed his tear-shining cheek to Jon's. Margaery, watching, felt her heart swell with equal parts joy and sorrow. How many scratches can a father bear before they break the child's faith? She wondered. She brushed Edric's hair, then turned to Bran carried past on a litter. The boy's eyes widened at the slumped prophet. She laid a calming hand on his back. Inside the great hall later, Tyrion studied the satchel's seal. If these designs promise glass steel thrice the hardness of Valyrian, conspiracy converges from both Essos and within the council. He poured a measure of arbor brandy, now rationed thanks to plague quarantine. I smell someone with more ambition than sense. Sansa circled the map table. The Sellsword commander wore gold plate. Such armor costs more than a Braavosi contract. Who funded them? Shireen laid a parchment bank order on the table. I found this on one prisoner. A note from the Iron Bank, payable to bearer on retrieval of the obsidian method. She traced the wax impression. The Iron Bank sigil, yes, but something strange. See the secondary stamp? That is the seal of the Golden Company. Tyrion whistled. The Golden Company dissolved after their defeat. Its officers scattered, but its coffers remained in the stepstones, exactly where Davos met the Wyvern fleet. Margaery folded arms. A splinter faction still hungers for kingdom and views the Forge as key. She considered, but they needed a northern ally to learn Bran's travel schedule. All eyes fell to Bran lying near the hearth, but he shook his head faintly. No traitor guided them. I glimpsed the plan in a dream. A crow whispered of a debt bound in wildfire and in dragon tears. It points south, where a shadow sits upon a painted table and counts the cost of peace. Memesaris. Tyrion set down his glass hard. Stannis. Shireen flinched. My father would never. Tyrion raised palms. Forgive me. Habit of naming ghosts. Jon looked to Sansa. We must interrogate the prisoner who carried that bank order. He was found dead in his cell. She said quietly. Vial of strangler hidden in molar. He bit down. Silence thickened like pitch. Margaery strode to the window, gazing across Winterfell's roofs. Snow swirled lazily despite the late season. Children's laughter drifted faint beneath. She thought of seedlings, bees, and the crocus that defied ice. Her reflection blurred in the wave glass. We fight phantoms, she said at last. Pirates, plague, secret bankers, faceless Sellswords. But the realm is not a chessboard where unseen hands move us. We have eyes. We will meet every shadow in the open sun. We gather the council in King's Landing again and expose the Iron Bank's dealings. Sansa nodded slowly. An emergency convocation. Invite every region's regent and 3 trade guilds. If Coin plots war, Coin must answer to the people. Then? Tyrion arched a brow. And if the Iron Bank refuses? Then, Jon said, it meets the same force that shattered the Night King. A coalition of those who remember the cost of darkness. Shireen stepped forward, placing her burned hand upon the table's edge. I'll sail to Braavos and request audience. The bank's ledger is not beyond question if the realm stands unified. Alone? Shireen? Jon asked. She drew a breath. With Davos, and with 100 unsullied Marines. Margaery turned from the window. If you go, I go. Tyrell accounts carry weight across the narrow sea. And I once charmed the high priest of the many-faced god into donating to orphanages. Bankers are softer than priests. Now. Jon opened his mouth to protest. She met his gaze unwavering. Hopeful, remember. He exhaled. Very well. I will accompany you as far as Dragonstone before turning inland to King's Landing. Bran remains here until healed. Bran closed his eyes. I will heal in the Godswood, among roots older than Coin. Go Botsu. 2 weeks later, the galley Starfall glided from White Harbor on dawn tide. Its hull shimmered with green pitch, sails embroidered with intertwined direwolf and rose. On deck, Margaery stood beside the forecastle rail, scarf whipping in salt wind. Davos gripped the wheel, gray hair salt-sprayed. Shireen studied distant gulls through a spyglass. Jon embraced Margaery one final time before descending gangplank. "When autumn drops its first leaf, return," he whispered. She kissed the corner of his mouth. Before the leaf touches ground, he pressed a small pouch into her palm, 2 obsidian shards from Bran's staff, now smoothed and polished. "Carry them close." Brows arched, she tucked them in bosom. "And you carry hope." The lines cast off. Waters churned. Jon watched until the sails shrank to a pale petal on horizon. Then, with Ghost trotting at heel, he mounted his destrier and spurred south. The King's Road felt both familiar and foreign. Villages Jon once passed as king in exile now flourished with orchard windmills and first men-style runestones marking communal wells. Children waved wooden dragon toys. Farmers tipped hats. Yet rumors chased him. Whispers of a black-skinned priest from Ashai preaching in Maidenpool. Of Sellswords massing again near Gulltown. Of brazen rats scurrying through the Red Keep's secret passages. At each tavern Jon listened, drank watered cider, and scribbled in a ledger. 3 days north of King's Landing, he met Daenerys at an inn named the Red Apple. She greeted him in the stable yard, silver hair bound, travel cloak smeared with road dust. A faint crease lined her brow. "Bravos?" she asked. "Gone," he said. 2 weeks ahead. Margaery, Shireen, Davos. A hint of relief. "Then we share the road." They rode together through dappled beech groves. She spoke of Drogon's restlessness. How at Dragonstone he paced cliffs and roared at storms, restless after seasons of sheathed flame. Jon told of Edric's archery lessons, Bran's obsidian song, and the fragile state of the gardens. Daenerys listened with solemn eyes. At dusk, they camped near a brook. She knelt to wash her hands, stared at ripples. "I once believed dragons alone could remake the world. Then I saw a rose grow through ice." She glanced at him. "You and Margaery tend it. I fear I remain the dragon. Now." "The dragon guarded the garden," he reminded. "But even dragons need rest." She gave half a smile. "Drogon disagrees." She rose, droplets falling from fingertips. "I worry he senses something dark, like the dead returning." Jon shook his head. "No shadows beyond greed. But greed stokes wars that burn like wildfire." They reached King's Landing at dawn. The city had changed. Blackened stones of the old sept now supported scaffolds for a new amphitheater of knowledge. The Hall of Scrolls, funded by booksellers' guilds. Street markets sold winter rose petals infused in honey, a craze delivered by Sansa's envoy. Yet tension underlay the bustle. Gold cloak patrols now wore odd copper studs on collars. Something new. Tyrion met them at the river gate, expression grim. "I fear the council will face a divided floor," he said, leading them through streets still slick with dawn dew. Trade guilds accused the regents of mishandling plague measures. Crownlanders claim the North hoards dragonglass tariffs. Dorne resents quarantine on citrus shipments. And somewhere the Iron Bank's envoy whispers loans to every dissatisfied ear. "Men?" Jon dismounted before the dragon pit, now converted into council forum with marble tiers. "We face a disease of trust," he said. "Exactly," Tyrion replied. "And trust rarely grows from speeches alone." Inside, representatives gathered, cloth-masked, murmuring. Jon, Daenerys, and Tyrion ascended the dais. Sansa stood already at the plinth, parchment in hand. Her speech rang across the vault. About shared peril, the Forge attack, sabotage of quarantine lines, promise of renewal. Oz rippled, but resentment simmered. A banker from the Guild of Traders stood. "How do we know the North speaks true?" A secret forging valley unknown to the rest, now turned fortress. "Show us the scrolls if they are ours." Murmurs rose. Tyrell merchants exchanged uneasy glances. Daenerys stepped forward. "The scrolls will remain sealed until the council decides a fair method of distribution. They are dangerous in wrong hands." The trader laughed bitterly. "Who is the wrong hands, Dragon Queen? The people you claim to defend?" John felt the tide slipping. He needed a symbol. Something undeniable. He scanned the tiers, found the High Steward of the Citadel delegation. "Grand Maester Blaze," he called. "Present your findings." The old man hobbled forward, producing a crystal vial of plague blood. Under magnifying lens, he displayed the crown spheres Sam had drawn. People leaned, curious and disturbed. Blaze explained contagion, masks, distance, the council's actions that had slowed spread, proof by numbers. Then Sam, freshly arrived overnight on Ravenback, presented an herbal tincture of pine, willow, and obsidian ash that had reduced fever in trials at Winterfell. He offered the formula free to any apothecary. Tension eased. Guild invoice conferred. Then the side door banged wide. Arya strode in, cloak spattered with mud, hair cropped shorter than when last John saw her. She tossed something before the dais. A purse bearing the wyvern emblem and a Bravosi contract signed by an Iron Bank notary. "I followed the money," she said. "It leads to a Bravosi broker named Moredo Seller, who sold both plague herbs, tainted, and weapon schematics to the Golden Company remnants. The Iron Bank fronted payment under false name. C. Lannister." Shocked whispers. Tyrion's eyes widened. "Cersei's secret funds," he murmured. "She buried ciphers before surrender." Arya nodded. Seller's ledgers named 30 Crownlander merchants as co-conspirators. They planned to destabilize the council, reinstall a puppet throne indebted to the bank. Guild envoys paled. Some stepped away from colleagues. Sansa's voice rang like ice. "Citizens of King's Landing, behold the face of treason. Not north, not south, but pockets lined with gold and fear." She pointed to the purse. "Will you let faceless financiers pit us against each other?" Murmurs turned to indignant roars. The traitor who had challenged Daenerys withdrew his accusation. "Show us justice, then we show trust," he called. Jon nodded to guards. They led named conspirators out. Tyrion stood, raising his wine cup. "To justice shared, costs shared, roses and wolves, both watered in truth." Applause thundered. Even skeptics clapped. Daenerys smiled faintly. Sansa read final decree. Iron Bank loans frozen until investigation. Dragonglass tariff lowered. Plague herb cured dispersal, funded by combined treasury. Bran's forge placed under rotating oversight by delegates from all regions, with Bran as warden. Motion passed without dissent. Outside, bells rang midday. Jon and Daenerys exited into sunlight, filtering through dust swirls. Jon found Arya leaning on a marble railing, shrugging at his raised brow. "Good hunt," he said. She grinned. "Rats squeak louder than lions, you just need the right alley." She sobered. "Margaery, en route to Bravostadpack. She'll meet Shireen with these revelations. Iron Bank will cooperate or face realm-wide embargo." "Man." Arya's smile widened. "Wolfish. I almost pity them." He clasped her shoulder. "Stay and help Sansa until I return north." "Tell Rose Queen I'll guard her garden," Arya replied. That night, Jon stood atop the rampart of the rebuilt Red Keep, staring over rooftops. Dragon's sword silhouetted against indigo sky, orange tongues flicking. He thought of Margaery crossing tempest seas, of Edric's small hand, of crocus blooms. The realm had bent, but not broken. Yet storms would come again from greed, ambition, fear. Gardens demanded ceaseless tending. Footsteps. Daenerys joined him, cloak fluttering. "Council adjourned," she said. "They toast Sam's cure in the taverns." He nodded. Silence unfurled. "Do you ever miss the wall?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Cold kept the world simple." She gazed into distance. "Simplicity dies with dragons." He smiled wryly. "So we prune complexity." She returned smile. "Prune gently, Gardener King." Lightning flickered far south. Summer storm rolling up Blackwater Bay. Under its glow, city spires shone new copper. Statues draped in flowers from street vendors. Dragons circled, but did not burn. Jon breathed salt-tinged air and felt, Beneath all the scars, the steady heartbeat of hope. And across the narrow sea, under lantern constellations that glimmered above Bravos lagoons, Margaery Tyrell stepped onto a marble quay scented with brine and basil. Shireen at her side, Davos behind, unsullied forming silent honor guard. The Iron Bank's midnight facade loomed ahead, pillars swept by gull wings, bronze doors etched with accounts older than empires. Margaery adjusted her lavender-lined cloak, touched the obsidian shards near her heart, and smiled the smile that once soothed dying men and shamed greedy lords. It was not the smile of a queen who wielded crowns and courts. It was the smile of a gardener who knew that, under the right hand, roots could crack granite and blossoms could bloom even on frozen lakes. And so she walked forward, ready to teach the world again how roses conquered steel.